Victor Crane slammed his fist on the mahogany desk so hard the whiskey glasses rattled. "Burn them, he hissed into the phone. "I don't care if there are people inside. Those planes cannot fly. Do you understand me? 70 years of secrets stay buried in that desert, or I will bury you instead." 3,000 miles away, a wounded Navy SEAL named Marcus Cole had no idea that the junkyard everyone laughed at him for inheriting contained aircraft worth $15 million. He had no idea that his grandfather had died, protecting a secret that powerful men would kill to keep hidden. And he certainly had no idea that in exactly 30 days he would either save his family's legacy or lose everything, including his life. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story moves you, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about hidden treasure, family secrets, and the price of freedom. The letter arrived on the worst day of Marcus Cole's life. Not the day he took shrapnel in his left leg during a mission in Afghanistan. Not the day the Navy doctors told him his career was over at 38. Not even the day he learned his wife Jennifer had died in a car accident while he was deployed on the other side of the world, unable to hold her hand or say goodbye. No, the worst day of it was the day his 16-year-old son Tyler looked him in the eye and said, "You're not my father. You're just a stranger who shares my last name." Marcus sat in the cramped room at the VA hospital in San Diego, his discharge papers spread across the bed like a map of everything he had lost. Medically retired. 2 words that erased 20 years of service, countless missions, and every sacrifice he had made for his country. His leg throbbed beneath the brace. The doctors said he was lucky to keep it. Marcus didn't feel lucky. He felt like a man who had given everything and been left with nothing. A knock on the door made him look up. "Mr. Cole." A young nurse held out an envelope. "Certified mail. You need to sign for it." Marcus scrawled his signature without thinking. The return address made his stomach clench. Hartwell and Associates Attorneys at Law, Tucson, Arizona. He hadn't spoken to anyone in Tucson for 15 years. Not since his grandfather, William Cole, had refused to attend Jennifer's funeral, nursing some ancient grievance that Marcus had never understood. The old man they called Wild Bill had chosen his precious junkyard over his own family. Marcus tore open the envelope. "Dear Mr. Cole," the letter began. "We regret to inform you of the passing of your grandfather, William Wild Bill Cole, on March 15th. As per his last will and testament, you have been named sole heir to his estate, consisting of approximately 52 acres of property located at 1847 Desert Ridge Road, including all structures, vehicles, and contents therein." Marcus read the words 3 times before they sank in. The old man was dead, and he had left Marcus everything. For a long moment, Marcus just sat there, the letter trembling in his hands. He tried to feel something. Grief, maybe, or anger, or even relief that the man who had abandoned his family was finally gone. But all he felt was empty. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Rachel, who had been taking care of Tyler since Jennifer's death. Tyler got suspended from school again. Fighting. "You need to come home, Marcus. He needs his father." Marcus closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the pillow. His son needed a father. But what did Marcus have to offer? A broken body, a dead career, and now an inheritance of 52 acres of rust and junk in the Arizona desert. Some legacy? He picked up the phone and called the attorney's office. "Hartwell and Associates, how may I direct your call? This is Marcus Cole. I received a letter about my grandfather's estate." "Ah, Mr. Cole, yes, we've been trying to reach you. Your grandfather left specific instructions that the property must be claimed within 30 days or it will be transferred to the state. There are also some outstanding debts that will need to be addressed." "What kind of debts?" "Property taxes primarily. The total comes to approximately $47,000. If you cannot pay within the 30-day window, the property will go to auction." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So I inherited a junkyard I can't afford to keep." "Mr. Cole, your grandfather was very specific in his will. He said, and I quote, 'Tell Marcus that some things are worth more than they appear. Tell him to look with his heart, not his eyes. And tell him I'm sorry I wasn't there when he needed me.'" The words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when he needed me." Was that supposed to make up for missing Jennifer's funeral? For 15 years of silence? For abandoning his family to guard a pile of rusted cars in the desert? "I'll be there in 3 days, Marcus said, and hung up before the attorney could respond. He spent those 3 days getting discharged from the hospital and flying to Phoenix. The Navy gave him a small severance and his final pay. Combined with his savings, he had about $12,000 to his name. Not enough to pay off his grandfather's debts, not enough to keep the property, and certainly not enough to rebuild a relationship with a son who hated him. But Marcus Cole had faced impossible odds before. He landed in Phoenix on a Tuesday afternoon, rented a car, and drove straight to his sister's house in Scottsdale. Rachel met him at the door with the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks. Where's Tyler?" "In his room. Marcus, I have to warn you, he's not the same kid you left 2 years ago. He's angry, he's hurting, and he blames you for everything." "I know." "Do you? Because he said some things after Jennifer died. Things I don't think he can take back." Marcus limped toward the hallway. "He's my son. I'm not giving up on him." He knocked on Tyler's door. No answer. "Tyler, it's me. I'm coming in." He pushed the door open and found his son sitting on the bed, headphones on, staring at his phone. Tyler had grown at least 3 inches since Marcus had last seen him. His shoulders had broadened. He looked like a young man, not the boy Marcus remembered. Tyler pulled off the headphones. His eyes were cold. "What do you want?" "I wanted to see you." "Now you want to see me. How nice. Where were you when Mom was dying? Where were you at her funeral? Where were you when I had to pack up her things and pretend like everything was fine?" Each word was a knife in Marcus's chest. "I was deployed. You know I couldn't get home in time." Couldn't or wouldn't. "Tyler, don't." Tyler stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "Don't make excuses. Don't tell me about duty and sacrifice and all that military garbage. Mom needed you. I needed you. And you weren't there." "I know, and I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her back." Tyler's voice cracked. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. You're not my father. You're just a stranger who sends birthday cards from the other side of the world." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that every mission had been for them to keep them safe, to provide for their future. But he knew Tyler wouldn't hear it. Not now. Maybe not ever. "I have to go to Tucson," Marcus said quietly. "Your great-grandfather died. He left me his property." Tyler snorted. "The junkyard perfect. You're inheriting a pile of garbage. That's exactly what you deserve." "I want you to come with me." "Why? So we can pretend to be a family while we sort through some dead old man's trash?" "Because he was your great-grandfather, because there might be something worth saving there, and because I'm asking you, please." Tyler stared at him for a long moment. Marcus could see the war playing out behind his son's eyes, the anger fighting with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or just the exhaustion of carrying so much hurt for so long. "Fine," Tyler said finally, "but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I want to see what the old man thought was worth more than his own family." They left before dawn the next morning. The drive from Phoenix to Tucson took about 2 hours, most of it in silence. Marcus tried to start conversations, but Tyler responded in grunts and one-word answers. Eventually, Marcus gave up and focused on the road. The Arizona desert stretched out on either side of the highway, ancient saguaro cacti standing like sentinels against the pale blue sky. Marcus had grown up in this landscape, but it felt foreign now. He had spent so many years in other countries, other wars, that he barely recognized his home state. They turned off the main highway onto a dirt road that wound through scrub brush and scattered boulders. A weathered sign appeared on the right side of the road. Cole's Salvage. Since 1946, someone had spray-painted closed across the bottom in black letters. "This is it," Tyler asked, the first words he had spoken in an hour. "This is it." Marcus pulled up to the gate. A heavy chain and padlock secured the entrance. He found the key in the envelope from the attorney and unlocked it, the chain rattling against the metal posts. They drove slowly through the entrance, and Marcus felt his heart sink. The place was a graveyard. Cars from every decade since the 1940s sat in rough rows, their paint faded to rust and dust. Some were stacked 3 high, creating metal mountains that cast long shadows across the sandy ground. Pickup trucks, sedans, muscle cars, family wagons, all of them slowly returning to the earth. "Jesus," Tyler breathed. "It's worse than I thought." Marcus parked near the main building, a corrugated steel structure that might have been white once but now wore the patina of decades under the desert sun. He climbed out of the car, his bad leg protesting after the long drive. Tyler followed it, looking around with an expression of barely contained disgust. "This is what he left us, a car cemetery. Apparently. And we owe $47,000 in taxes on this. Apparently." Tyler kicked at the dirt. "Great. So we came all this way to look at a bunch of junk we can't afford to keep. What a waste of time." Marcus didn't respond. Something was nagging at him. Something his SEAL training wouldn't let him ignore. He looked at the layout of the junkyard, the way the cars were arranged, the sight lines between the structures. This wasn't random chaos. His grandfather had been strategic. Certain areas were deliberately hidden from view. The stacked cars created barriers that blocked specific sight lines. Someone standing at the gate wouldn't be able to see what was behind those barriers. "What?" Tyler asked, noticing his father's expression. "Nothing. Let's check out the main building." They found the door unlocked. Inside, the air was stifling thick with the smell of old motor oil and rubber. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools that looked older than Marcus himself. Everything was covered in dust, but beneath the grime, the tools were clean and well-maintained. "Look at this stuff," Tyler said, picking up a wooden-handled awl with a brass ferrule. "This is quality craftsmanship, antique quality." Marcus watched his son examine the tool with careful attention. Despite everything, Tyler had inherited something from the Cole bloodline, an eye for mechanical detail, an appreciation for things built to last. He wasn't just collecting junk, Tyler observed, moving to another workbench. He was preserving things. Look at how everything's organized, sorted by type by era. This isn't hoarding. This is curation. "When did you become an expert on junk curation?" Tyler shot him a look. "I've been building model airplanes since I was 12. You would know that if you'd ever been around." Another knife in the chest. Marcus let it pass. They spent the next hour exploring the property. Despite the apparent chaos, there was organization to it. Domestic cars in one section, imports in another, trucks along the back perimeter. His grandfather had been methodical even in his collecting. As the sun began to drop toward the mountains, Marcus found himself standing near the back corner of the property. Something had caught his eye earlier, a glint of metal behind a wall of stacked car bodies. Now in the dying light he saw it again, something that didn't belong, something that wasn't automotive. "Tyler," he called. "Come here." His son jogged over, following Marcus's gaze. "What is it?" "I'm not sure, but I want to find out." They found the ancient forklift in a shed near the main building. Marcus was amazed it still ran, but it coughed to life after a few tries, wheezing like an old man on a cold morning. He drove it toward the back corner, Tyler walking alongside. It took them an hour to move enough cars to create a gap in the barrier. The forklift groaned and protested, but it did the job, lifting rusted hulks and setting them aside. What they revealed made Marcus question his sanity. Hidden behind the wall of cars was a massive building. 60 feet long, 40 feet wide, corrugated steel walls, no windows. The structure looked newer than everything else on the property, its walls straight and solid despite decades in the desert. And it was secured with 3 military-grade padlocks. "What the hell?" Tyler whispered. Marcus approached the doors slowly. His SEAL training kicked in automatically. He checked for tripwires, pressure plates, any sign of booby traps. Nothing. He pulled out the ring of keys from the attorney's envelope. Most were obviously for vehicles or standard doors, but 3 stood out. Heavier, more complex. The kind of keys that opened serious locks. The first key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. The second key turned smoothly. The third practically fell away. Marcus's heart was pounding now. 20 years of combat experience, and his hands were shaking like a rookie on his first mission. "Dad?" Tyler's voice was uncertain. "What do you think is in there?" Marcus didn't answer. He gripped the door handle and pulled. The doors swung open with a groan of protesting hinges. Inside, darkness, but there was a smell. Oil canvas and something else. Something that triggered memories Marcus couldn't quite place. He found the light switch and flipped it. Banks of fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead. And Marcus Cole stopped breathing. 3 aircraft sat in the hangar. Not cars, not trucks, not any kind of automotive junk. 3 World War II fighter planes draped in canvas covers, preserved like sleeping giants waiting to be awakened. "Holy..." Tyler started, and then caught himself. "Dad, those are airplanes." Marcus moved like a man in a dream. He approached the nearest aircraft, his fingers fumbling with the knots that secured the canvas cover. The material was old but well-maintained, tied with the precision of someone who intended to protect what lay beneath. The canvas fell away. The aircraft beneath gleamed like it had just rolled off the assembly line. A fighter plane, its aluminum skin polished to mirror brightness. The cockpit canopy was intact, and the propeller blades positioned with mechanical perfection. Along the fuselage, faded but still visible, were the numbers 44, 84, 887, and below that, in flowing script, Betty's Dream. Marcus's knees nearly buckled. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These things don't just exist in private collections." Tyler had already moved to the second aircraft, pulling away its cover with eager hands. What emerged was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. A fighter with twin engines and an unusual twin fuselage design. The markings read 44, 65, 168, and below the cockpit was painted Desert Fox. "Dad, I've built models of these things. This is a P-82 twin Mustang. They only made about 200 of them. Most were scrapped after Korea." The third plane was different, sleeker, more aggressive. When they removed its cover, they found an aircraft painted in navy blue with white stars. Its configuration was strange, unfamiliar even to Marcus's trained eye. "I don't recognize this one," Tyler said, circling it with wide eyes. Marcus noticed a manila folder on a workbench along the far wall. He opened it with trembling hands and found maintenance logs, fuel records, and correspondence dating back to 1946. At the bottom was a letter in his grandfather's handwriting. "To whoever finds these birds, these planes came home from the war broken in spirit, if not in body. The government wanted to melt them down for scrap, but I couldn't let that happen. Every rivet, every wire, every piece of aluminum represents the courage of young men who gave everything for their country. I saved them not for profit, but for memory. If you're reading this, I hope you'll understand that some things are worth more than money. They're worth preserving for the generations who will never know the sound of freedom flying overhead. I'm sorry I wasn't the grandfather you deserved. I hope these birds can explain what I never could." Your grandfather, William Wild Bill Cole Marcus's hand dropped to his side. The letter slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. 60 years. His grandfather had spent 60 years hiding and preserving 3 aircraft that shouldn't exist. While the family thought he was crazy while they wrote him off as a hermit obsessed with junk, William Cole had been guarding treasures worth millions of dollars. And now they belonged to Marcus. "Dad?" Tyler's voice was different now, softer. The anger was still there, but something else had crept in. Wonder, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. "What are we going to do?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. "Hello, Mr. Cole." The voice was smooth-cultured and cold. "My name is Victor Crane. I understand you've recently inherited some interesting property in the Arizona desert." Marcus's SEAL instincts flared to full alert. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources, Mr. Cole. Many resources. I also have a business proposition for you. Those aircraft you just discovered, Brist, are worth approximately $15 million on the open market. But more importantly, they contain certain classified elements that should have been destroyed decades ago. I'm prepared to offer you $3 million in cash to walk away and forget you ever saw them." "Who are you?" "Someone who knows the true value of what you found, and someone who knows what will happen if you try to keep it." Marcus looked at the 3 aircraft at his son standing among them with wonder in his eyes at the letter his grandfather had written, hoping someone would understand. "I'm not selling." The line was silent for a moment. When Crane spoke again, all the smoothness was gone from his voice. "Mr. Cole, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. These planes represent secrets that powerful people have spent 70 years protecting. You can take my offer and live comfortably for the rest of your life. Or you can fight me and lose everything, your property, your freedom, maybe even your life." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, my generosity expires." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone in his hand, then looked up at the 3 aircraft that his grandfather had given his life to protect. 24 hours, $47,000 in debt. Powerful enemies who would kill to keep these planes hidden. And a 16-year-old son who was just beginning to understand that family legacies were worth fighting for. Marcus Cole had been trained for impossible missions. He had operated behind enemy lines with no backup and no extraction plan. He had faced death 100 times and walked away. But this was different. This was personal. And he had no idea just how deep the secrets went or how far Victor Crane would go to keep them buried. What Marcus didn't know was that at that exact moment, 3,000 miles away, Crane was making another phone call. "Senator Mercer," Crane said, "we have a problem. William Cole's grandson found the planes, and he's not going to cooperate." The voice on the other end was cold with barely controlled fury. "Those aircraft were supposed to be destroyed in 1946. My father spent his entire career making sure that scandal stayed buried." "I'm aware of the history, Senator." "Then you're also aware of what happens if those planes become public. Do whatever it takes, Crane. I don't care how much it costs or who gets hurt. Those aircraft cannot fly. Those secrets cannot come out." Crane smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "I understand completely. I've already dispatched a team. By this time tomorrow, the only thing left of those planes will be melted aluminum and faded memories." "Good. And the grandson?" Navy SEAL, wounded in combat, recently discharged, estranged from his family, no money, no connections, no one who would miss him. Then this shouldn't be difficult. Crane ended the call and looked out the window of his Manhattan penthouse. 70 years of secrets buried in an Arizona junkyard. Secrets that connected defense contractors, military officers, and United States senators in a web of fraud and cover-up that had never been exposed. William Cole had been a problem for decades. The old man had known too much, protected too much, lived too long. But now he was dead, and his grandson was about to learn that some legacies came with a price tag written in blood. Back in Arizona, Marcus locked the hangar doors and pocketed the keys. His mind was racing, processing the threat, analyzing the situation, planning his next moves. Tyler stood beside him, the last rays of sunset painting the desert gold and red. "Dad, who was that on the phone? Someone who wants these planes very badly." "What are we going to do?" Marcus looked at his son. For the first time in years, Tyler wasn't looking at him with anger or resentment. He was looking at him the way a son should look at his father, with trust, with hope, with the expectation that somehow the old man would know what to do. Marcus put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "We're going to protect what your great-grandfather spent his life preserving, and we're going to find out why these planes are worth killing for." Tyler nodded slowly. Together. It was such a small word. Together, but it meant everything. "Together?" Marcus said. They walked back toward the car as the stars began to appear overhead. Behind them, 3 aircraft worth $15 million waited in the darkness. Ahead of them, enemies were already moving. And somewhere in the desert night, William Cole's secrets were about to tear open wounds that had been buried for 70 years. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the next 30 days would test everything he believed about duty, family, and sacrifice. He would discover that his grandfather's planes were connected to a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of government. He would face enemies with unlimited resources and no conscience. He would be forced to choose between his son's safety and his grandfather's legacy. And he would learn that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with courage, faith, and the unbreakable bonds between fathers and sons. But all of that was still to come. For now, Marcus Cole stood in the Arizona desert, a wounded warrior with a broken family and an impossible mission. And for the first time since Jennifer died, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Purpose. He didn't have money, he didn't have connections, he didn't have the strength he once had. But he had his training, he had his grandfather's legacy, and he had his son standing beside him. It would have to be enough. Because Victor Crane's men were already on their way, and they weren't coming to negotiate. They drove through the darkness in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the cold, angry quiet of 2 strangers forced together. This was the silence of 2 people processing something too big for words. Tyler spoke first. "Dad, how did that guy know about the planes? We just found them an hour ago." Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Someone's been watching the property, probably for years. Watching Grandpa. Watching the planes. Whatever's in that hangar, it's valuable enough that people have been keeping tabs on it for decades." Tyler pulled out his phone and started typing. "I'm looking up the serial numbers. That P-51, the Betty's Dream. Maybe I can find something about its history." Good thinking. They were 10 miles from the junkyard when Marcus noticed headlights in the rearview mirror, a black SUV keeping distance but matching their speed exactly. "Tyler." "Yeah." "Don't turn around. We're being followed." Tyler's fingers froze over his phone. "What do we do?" Marcus's training took over. He accelerated gradually, watching the SUV match his speed. He slowed down. The SUV slowed down. No doubt about it. "Hold on." He yanked the wheel hard right, sending the rental car onto a dirt road that cut through the desert scrub. The SUV's headlights swung to follow. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Finding out who they are." Marcus killed the headlights and drove by. By moonlight, his eyes adjusting quickly. He had done this 100 times in Afghanistan, navigating terrain by starlight with enemies on his tail. The SUV behind them was struggling. Its driver clearly not trained for off-road pursuit. He spotted what he was looking for, a cluster of boulders that would provide cover. He pulled behind them and killed the engine. "Get down and stay quiet." Tyler ducked below the dashboard without argument. Marcus reached under his seat and pulled out the Ka-Bar knife he always kept within reach. Old habits died hard. The SUV approached slowly, its headlights sweeping the desert. It stopped about 50 yards away. The engine idled for a long moment. Then a voice called out through a megaphone. "Mr. Cole, there's no need for games. We just want to talk." Marcus didn't respond. He watched as two figures emerged from the SUV. Both moved with military precision. Both carried themselves like men who knew how to use the weapons they were carrying. "Mr. Crane is a reasonable man," the voice continued. "His offer still stands. $3 million, more money than you'll ever see in your lifetime. All you have to do is walk away." Marcus waited. "You have a son, Mr. Cole, a 16-year-old boy who's already lost his mother. Does he need to lose his father, too?" Tyler's hand found Marcus's arm in the darkness. The boy was trembling, but when Marcus looked at him, he saw not fear, but anger. "They threatened me," Tyler whispered. "They actually threatened me." Marcus nodded. Something shifted in his chest. Something that had been broken for a long time suddenly clicked back into place. These men had made a mistake. They had threatened his son. "Stay here," Marcus breathed. "No matter what happens, stay in this car." Before Tyler could protest, Marcus slipped out of the vehicle and disappeared into the darkness. He moved the way he had been trained to move. Silent, invisible. A ghost in the desert night. The two men from the SUV were scanning the area with flashlights, their beams cutting through the darkness but missing him completely. Marcus circled behind them. "I don't see anything," one of the men said. "Maybe they kept driving." "The dust trail ends here. They're close." Marcus was 10 feet behind them now. He could hear their breathing, smell their sweat. City boys, he thought. Good with guns maybe, but they had no idea how to operate in the field. He picked up a stone and threw it to his left. Both men spun toward the sound, raising their weapons. Marcus moved. He hit the first man in the back of the knee, dropping him instantly. Before the second could react, Marcus had his arm around the man's throat knife pressed against his jugular. "Drop the weapon." The gun clattered to the ground. The first man was trying to get up. Marcus kicked him in the ribs hard enough to keep him down, but not hard enough to cause permanent damage. "Who sent you?" "You know who sent us?" The man in Marcus's grip gasped. "I want to hear you say it." "Crane. Victor Crane." "And who does Crane work for?" The man hesitated. Marcus pressed the knife harder. "I don't know, I swear. We're just contractors. We get paid to follow orders." "What were your orders tonight?" "Surveillance. Find out what you know. Report back." "That's all. If you refuse to cooperate, we were supposed to..." The man trailed off. "Supposed to what?" "Make sure you understood the consequences." Marcus felt cold fury wash through him. "The consequences..." "Look, man, we're just doing a job. Crane said you'd see reason, said you were smart enough to take the money and walk away." Marcus released the man and stepped back. "Tell Crane I'm not walking away. Tell him if he sends anyone else after me or my son, I'll send them back in pieces. And tell him whatever secrets are in that hangar, I'm going to find out the truth." He picked up both men's weapons and emptied the magazines, scattering the bullets across the desert floor. "Start walking. Your SUV stays here." "It's 10 miles to the highway." "Then you'd better get moving." Marcus watched them stumble into the darkness, then retrieve Tyler from behind the boulders. The boy's eyes were wide, but there was something new in them. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "You did that," Tyler said. "You took down 2 armed men in like 30 seconds. "I had training." "That wasn't just training, that was..." Tyler shook his head. "I never understood what you did. What you really did. Mom always said you were a hero, but I thought she was just saying that." Marcus started the car and headed back toward the highway. "I'm not a hero, Tyler. I'm just a man who learned a specific set of skills. Skills I never wanted you to see. But you used them to protect me." "I'd do anything to protect you. I know I haven't been there. I know I missed things I can never get back. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "Mom used to say that too, that you'd come back when it mattered." "And did she believe it?" "She did, right up until the end." The words hit Marcus like shrapnel. His vision blurred and he had to blink hard to clear it. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." "I know, Dad. I'm starting to understand." They drove the rest of the way in a different kind of silence. Something had shifted between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. 6 hours later, the sun rose over the junkyard. Marcus had spent the night making calls. His sister Rachel telling her they were safe, but that they might be in some danger. A former SEAL buddy in Phoenix who agreed to do some digging on Victor Crane. And finally, the number Tom Bradley had given him months ago, back when Marcus was still in the hospital and Bradley was visiting wounded veterans. Tom, it's Marcus Cole. I need help. Bradley's voice was instantly alert. What kind of help? The kind that involves World War II aircraft and people who want to keep them hidden. A long pause. Where are you? My grandfather's junkyard, outside Tucson. Don't move. Don't let anyone in. I'll be there by noon. Bradley arrived at 11:45 driving a battered pickup truck that looked older than Marcus. With him was a woman Marcus hadn't expected. Silver hair, leather jacket, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Marcus Cole, Bradley said, shaking his hand firmly. This is Dorothy Hayes. She's going to want to see what you found. Dorothy stepped forward, her gaze direct and appraising. Your grandfather was William Cole. Yes, ma'am. I knew him. I worked with him on some projects over the years. He never told me exactly what he was protecting, but I always suspected it was something special. She looked toward the back of the property where the hidden hangar waited. Show me. They walked through the maze of rusted cars, Tyler leading the way with the keys. When they reached the hangar and the doors swung open, Dorothy stopped in her tracks. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at the 3 preserved aircraft like a woman seeing ghosts. Dear God, she whispered, he actually did it. She moved toward the P-51 Mustang, her hands clasped behind her back, as if she didn't trust herself not to touch it. Betty's dream. I remember this aircraft. I ferried her from the factory in California to a base in Texas in 1944. Her voice cracked. They told me she was scrapped after the war. You flew this plane, Tyler asked. Dorothy turned to him with a sad smile. Son, I flew everything the Army Air Force had. I was with the WASP, Women Air Force Service Pilots. We delivered new aircraft, tested repaired planes, towed targets for gunnery practice. 1,000 women served. 38 died. She moved to the twin Mustang, and her expression grew even more intense. This shouldn't exist. The P-82 Desert Fox was reported destroyed over Korea in 1950. Shot down. Pilot killed. She looked at Marcus. But she's here. Perfectly preserved. Tom Bradley was examining the experimental Tiger Cat, taking notes and photographing details. Marcus, do you have any idea what you have here? I know they're valuable. Valuable doesn't begin to cover it. Bradley pulled out a notebook filled with research. The P-51 is worth about $4 million on the open market. A museum-quality restoration of a P-82 twin Mustang may be $6 or $7 million. But this Tiger Cat prototype... He shook his head. I've never seen anything like it. It might be the only surviving example of its type. That makes it priceless. 15 to 20 million for all 3, Dorothy added. But the money isn't what matters. Then what does? Dorothy approached Marcus, her eyes fierce with something that went beyond academic interest. These planes represent secrets, Marcus. Secrets that someone has spent 70 years trying to bury. Your grandfather didn't just save aircraft. He saved evidence. Evidence of what? That's what we need to find out. Marcus showed them the journal he had found, and Dorothy read through it with growing intensity. Some entries made her laugh with recognition. Others made her cry. Charlie Morrison, she said, pointing to a name. I knew him. He was 22 when he died over Berlin. His P-51 came back without him shot to pieces, but still flying. She looked at Betty's dream. That's his plane. Your grandfather saved it because it was all that was left of a young man who gave everything. Tyler had been exploring the hangar while the adults talked. Now he called out from a corner near the workbench. Dad, I found something. He held up a metal plate small enough to fit in his palm. An inscription was engraved on its surface. Dorothy took it and read aloud. In memory of the men who flew these birds into harm's way and in hope that future generations will remember their courage. E. Salazar, 1946. She paused. Wait, Salazar. My grandmother was a Salazar before she married my grandfather Marcus said. No, that's not what I mean. Dorothy pulled out her phone and started searching. Esteban Salazar was a mechanic in the Army Air Force. He was court-martialed in 1946 for falsifying transportation records. They said he diverted aircraft meant for scrap yards. He was convicted and served 2 years in military prison. She looked up at Marcus. He was your grandfather's partner. They were working together. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to come together. My grandfather never talked about the war, not once. My father said he refused to discuss it. Because discussing it would have meant revealing what he'd done, what he and Esteban Salazar did together. Dorothy's voice was filled with admiration. They didn't steal aircraft for profit. They rescued them, saved them from destruction, and they paid a terrible price for it. The sound of vehicles approaching made everyone freeze. Marcus moved to the hangar window. 2 black SUVs were pulling up to the junkyard gate, and the men getting out were not the same amateurs from the night before. These were professionals. Body armor, tactical weapons. They moved like a military unit. Tom, get Dorothy and Tyler out of here. There's a back door that leads to the old workshop. My car is parked behind the main building. What about you? I'll buy you time. Marcus, there are 6 of them. I've faced worse odds. Get to me. He handed Tom the car keys. Protect my son. Tyler grabbed his arm. Dad, no. You can't take on 6 armed men alone. I'm not planning to fight them. I'm planning to delay them. Marcus looked at his son, memorizing his face. Whatever happens, don't come back for me. Get to safety, call the police, and tell them everything. Dad? Tyler, I wasn't there for your mother. I wasn't there for you. Let me be here now. Let me do what I was trained to do. Dorothy stepped forward. There's another option. She pulled out her phone. I have friends in the aviation community, powerful friends, people who've been looking for these aircraft for decades. If I can make one call, make it fast. The men outside had breached the gate and were moving through the junkyard in tactical formation. They would reach the hidden hangar in less than 5 minutes. Dorothy spoke rapidly into her phone. It's Dorothy Hayes, codename Rosie. I found them. Yes, all 3. But we have hostiles moving in. I need immediate extraction and security. A pause. Understood. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Marcus shook his head. We don't have 15 minutes. Then we'll have to give them a reason to wait. Dorothy's eyes hardened with a warrior's determination. I didn't survive 38 combat support missions to die in a junkyard. Tom helped me get Betty started. Started, Dorothy, we can't fly. I'm not flying. I'm making noise. She was already climbing into the P-51's cockpit with the agility of someone half her age. A Merlin engine makes a very distinctive sound. Everyone in a 20-mile radius will hear it, including the police, the media, and anyone else with ears. Marcus understood immediately. You're calling for backup. I'm making these men decide whether they want to commit crimes in front of witnesses, because in about 60 seconds, everyone in Tucson is going to know something is happening out here. Tom threw open the main hangar doors while Dorothy primed the engine. Marcus watched the approaching men through the gap, counting seconds. The P-51's engine coughed. The men were 300 yards out. The engine coughed again, then caught with a roar that shook the walls of the hangar. The men stopped. Dorothy advanced the throttle, and the sound became thunderous, a mechanical scream that echoed across the desert like a declaration of war. The propeller spun, creating a windstorm that sent dust and debris flying. Marcus saw the men conferring their weapons still raised, but their formation broken. They hadn't expected this. They had come prepared for a quiet acquisition, not a spectacle that was probably waking up everyone in the county. Through the chaos, Marcus spotted their leader speaking into a radio. A moment later, the men began to fall back. Dorothy cut the engine, and the sudden silence was almost as shocking as the noise had been. They're retreating, Tyler said from the doorway. For now. Marcus watched the SUVs speed away down the dirt road. They'll be back, and next time, they'll come prepared for anything. Tom Bradley was staring at Dorothy with undisguised admiration. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Dorothy climbed out of the cockpit, brushing dust from her leather jacket. Son, I've been causing trouble since before you were born, and I'm not done yet. Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. That was impressive, Mr. Cole. Victor Crane's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, something that hadn't been there before. An 84-year-old woman starting up a World War II fighter to scare off my men. I underestimated you. You underestimated her. Indeed, but that little stunt only delays the inevitable. Those aircraft contain classified technology that was supposed to be destroyed 70 years ago. Technology that cannot be made public. What technology? That's not your concern. What is your concern is this. I gave you a chance to walk away wealthy. You refused. Now, if the offer is off the table, you have 24 hours to vacate the property and surrender the aircraft. If you refuse, I will burn that junkyard to the ground with everything in it, including my grandfather's legacy. Your grandfather was a thief and a traitor. He stole government property and spent 60 years hiding from justice. His legacy is a prison cell and a dishonorable discharge. Marcus felt cold fury rising in his chest. My grandfather served his country with honor. Whatever he did because he believed it was right. What he believed doesn't matter. What matters is what I can prove, and I can prove enough to have you arrested for possession of stolen military assets. Think about that, Mr. Cole. Think about what happens to your son if you're sitting in a federal prison." The line went dead. Dorothy had heard enough of the conversation to understand. "He's bluffing about the stolen property. I've already checked the records. Your grandfather acquired these aircraft through legitimate surplus channels. Can you prove it?" "It will take time, but yes, I can prove it." Marcus looked at the 3 aircraft, then at his son, then at the 2 people who had risked their lives to help him. "Then that's what we do. We prove my grandfather wasn't a thief. We find out what secrets these planes are hiding, and we make it public before Crane can bury it again." Tom Bradley nodded slowly. "I know someone who might be able to help. A graduate student at Arizona State. She's writing her dissertation on World War II aviation archaeology. If anyone can dig up the truth about these planes, it's her." "What's her name?" "Dr. Sarah Chen. Well, she's not a doctor yet, but she will be soon. She's brilliant, thorough, and she doesn't give up easily. Call her."
Sure.
As Bradley made this call, Marcus walked to the P-51 Mustang and placed his hand on its wing. The metal was cool beneath his palm, smooth and perfectly maintained. "Betty's dream," he said quietly. "What secrets are you keeping?" The aircraft didn't answer, but somewhere in its aluminum skin and mechanical heart were the answers Marcus needed. Answers that would expose Victor Crane, vindicate his grandfather, and protect the legacy that 3 generations of Coles had sacrificed to preserve. He just had to find them before Crane's next move, and something told him that Crane's next move was already in motion. 3 hours later, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived. She was younger than Marcus expected, late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and hands that moved expressively when she talked. She carried 3 laptops, a scanner, and what looked like an entire archive of research materials. "Mr. Cole," she said, shaking his hand firmly, "Tom told me what you found. I've been researching aircraft like these for 5 years. I never thought I'd actually see one in person." 3 of them. Sarah's eyes widened. 3, Tom said there was a P-51 and a twin Mustang, but there's also an experimental prototype, F-7F Tigercat variant. We're not sure exactly what it is. Sarah was already moving toward the hangar. "Show me." What followed was 4 hours of the most intensive documentation Marcus had ever witnessed. Sarah photographed every serial number, every data plate, every modification and marking on all 3 aircraft. She scanned pages from his grandfather's journal and cross-referenced them with databases on her laptop. By late afternoon, she had a preliminary assessment. "These aircraft are authentic," she said. "No question, but there's something strange about the Tigercat. The modifications don't match any variant I've ever seen. Someone made significant changes to the radar system, the weapons configuration, and the engine housing." "What kind of changes?" "I'm not sure yet, but I found correspondence in your grandfather's files that mentions something called Project Nightfall. It was a classified program in 1945-46 developing advanced night fighting capabilities for carrier operations." She pulled up a document on her laptop. According to these records, Project Nightfall was terminated in early 1946, and all prototype aircraft were ordered destroyed to prevent the technology from falling into Soviet hands. Dorothy leaned forward. "But the Tigercat wasn't destroyed." "No, according to the falsified transportation records, this aircraft was loaded onto a train bound for a California scrapyard in March 1946, but it never arrived." Marcus studied the Tigercat with new eyes. "Someone diverted it, someone who knew its value." "Your grandfather and Esteban Salazar," Sarah confirmed. "They saved 3 aircraft that were marked for destruction, but here's what I don't understand. Why would the military want these planes destroyed so badly? Night fighting technology wasn't that revolutionary. The Soviets had their own programs. There had to be something else." Tyler had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. "The guy on the phone. Crane. He said the planes contained classified technology that was supposed to be destroyed. Technology that cannot be made public." Sarah nodded slowly. "Whatever Project Nightfall really was, it wasn't just about night fighters. There's something in these aircraft that someone is still desperate to hide 70 years later." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number, 23 hours remaining." Crane wasn't bluffing about the deadline. "We need to work faster," Marcus said. "Sarah, can you get access to military archives, original Project Nightfall documents?" "I have a contact at the National Archives in Washington, but getting classified documents released takes time. Months, sometimes years." Dorothy stood up abruptly. I might know a faster way. There are people in the aviation community who've been collecting documents like these for decades. Collectors, historians, former military officers who kept records they weren't supposed to keep. She looked at Marcus. Your grandfather was part of that network. He had to have contacts, people he trusted, with information about what he was doing. How do we find them? The journal. If William Cole documented his preservation efforts, he probably documented his contacts too. Names, addresses, code words, something. They divided the journal among themselves and started searching. Hours passed. The sun set and rose again. Coffee was consumed by the gallon. At 7 in the morning, Tyler found something. Dad, look at this. He held up a page covered in his grandfather's precise handwriting. It's a list of names and dates, and next to each name there's a notation. See this one, Morrison C., 1945, Berlin. And next to it, Betty's dream. Sarah took the page, her eyes widening. These are pilots. Pilots who died flying these aircraft or aircraft like them. Your grandfather wasn't just preserving planes. He was memorializing the men who flew them. Dorothy pointed to another entry. Salazar E. 1946, Leavenworth. That's Esteban Salazar. He was imprisoned at Leavenworth for the court-martial conviction. And look at the bottom of the page, Tyler said. There's a name with a question mark next to it. Mercer R. 1946, Washington. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Mercer. Victor Crane mentioned someone in Washington, someone powerful who wanted these planes to stay hidden. Sarah was already searching on her laptop. Mercer? Mercer? Here. Senator Richard Mercer, current chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He's been in Congress for 30 years. What about his father? More typing. Robert Mercer. Served in the War Department during World War II. He was involved in military procurement and... Sarah stopped, her face going pale. Defense contractor oversight. He was in charge of making sure contractors delivered what they promised. Dorothy understood immediately. Fraud. If Project Nightfall was terminated and all prototypes were ordered destroyed, it wasn't because of Soviet espionage fears. It was to hide evidence that contractors had been paid for aircraft that were never built properly or never built at all. And Robert Mercer was the one who authorized the destruction, Sarah added, to cover up the fraud he was involved in. Marcus looked at the list of names on his grandfather's page. Men who had died. Men whose aircraft had been scrapped to hide the evidence of corruption. Men whose sacrifice had been erased by bureaucrats protecting their own interests. My grandfather knew, he said quietly. He knew what they were hiding, and he spent 60 years preserving the evidence they tried to destroy. Tyler stared at his father. That's why they want the planes so badly. It's not about classified technology, it's about covering up a 70-year-old scandal. A scandal that reaches all the way to the United States Senate, Dorothy confirmed. Senator Mercer's entire political career is built on his father's reputation. If the truth about Project Nightfall comes out... Marcus's phone rang. Victor Crane? 17 hours, Mr. Cole. I hope you've used them wisely. I know about Project Nightfall. I know about Robert Mercer and the contractor fraud. I know what you're really trying to hide. The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. When Crane spoke again, all pretense of civility was gone. You have no idea what you've done. Those accusations involve some of the most powerful people in this country. People who will crush you and everyone you care about without a second thought. Then let them try. I'm going public. The world is going to know who did what my grandfather spent his life protecting. If you do that, you will destroy more than a senator's career. You will expose secrets that could destabilize the entire defense establishment, billions of dollars in contracts, decades of classified programs. You'll be labeled a traitor and a terrorist. Or I'll be labeled a hero, the man who exposed corruption and honored the soldiers who died because of it. Crane laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hero. You think this is a movie, Mr. Cole? You think you're the good guy who wins in the end? This is the real world. In the real world, heroes die alone in the desert and their secrets die with them. My grandfather didn't die alone. He died knowing that someday someone would find those planes and learn the truth. He trusted me with that responsibility, and I'm not going to let him down. Marcus ended the call. Everyone in the hangar was staring at him. Dorothy, Tom, Sarah, and Tyler. 4 people who had risked everything to help him. 4 people who were now targets because of what they knew. He's going to come after us, Sarah said quietly. All of us. I know. We need to go public immediately, before he can stop us. Marcus nodded. Can you get the documentation ready? Everything we found about Project Nightfall, the contractor fraud, the cover-up. Give me 4 hours. You have 3. Dorothy, can you contact your friends in the aviation community? We need witnesses, as many as possible, people who can verify the authenticity of these aircraft and testify about what they represent. I'll make the calls. Marcus turned to his son. Tyler, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to leave. Go to your aunt's house in Scottsdale. Stay there until this is over. Tyler's jaw tightened. No. This isn't a request. These people are dangerous. They've already threatened your life once. I'm not going to let them... Dad, stop. Tyler stepped forward and Marcus saw the young man his son was becoming. Strong, determined, unafraid. You spent my whole life trying to protect me from a distance, sending money instead of being there. Missing birthdays, Christmases, Mom's funeral. You weren't there because you thought staying away would keep me safe. Marcus's throat tightened. Tyler, but you were wrong. What kept me safe was having a family, having people who loved me even when they weren't there. Mom understood that. Grandpa understood that, and now I understand it too. Tyler's voice was steady. I'm not leaving. I'm staying here to help protect what our family built. What great-grandpa died protecting. What you're fighting for now. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not the angry teenager who blamed him for everything, but a young man standing on the edge of adulthood, ready to take his place in a legacy that stretched back generations. Okay, Marcus said finally. Okay? But you stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Tyler nodded. No arguments. Dorothy returned from making her calls. Help is on the way. Former WASP pilots, aviation collectors, media contacts. They'll start arriving within the hour. What about security? The aviation community has its own resources. There are people coming who served in every branch of the military. They may be old, but they know how to handle themselves. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope that they would survive this, but hope that they would win. That truth would triumph over corruption, that sacrifice would be honored instead of forgotten. But even as hope filled his chest, he knew the hardest part was still to come. Victor Crane wasn't going to give up easily, and somewhere in Washington, Senator Richard Mercer was probably making calls of his own. The battle for his grandfather's legacy was just beginning, and Marcus Cole was finally ready to fight. The first vehicles arrived at 9:15 in the morning. Marcus counted them as they came down the dirt road. Pickup truck sedans, even a vintage military Jeep that looked like it had rolled straight out of 1944. The drivers were mostly elderly men and women in their 70s and 80s, but they moved with purpose and determination. Dorothy met each one at the gate embracing old friends she hadn't seen in decades. Marcus, this is Colonel James Patterson, retired Air Force. He flew F-86 Sabres in Korea. Patterson shook Marcus's hand with a grip that belied his 83 years. Dorothy told me what you found. Those planes deserve to fly again, son. Whatever you need, I'm here. By 10 o'clock, there were 27 people on the property. Veterans, aviation historians, former military mechanics. Sarah Chen had set up a command center in the main workshop coordinating documentation efforts while fielding calls from media contacts. CNN wants an exclusive, she reported. So does Fox News. The Aviation History Channel is sending a crew. This story is about to go national. Marcus felt the momentum building, but something was wrong. It was too quiet. No more threatening calls from Crane. No SUVs circling the property. The enemy had gone silent, and that made Marcus more nervous than any direct threat. At 10:45, his instincts proved correct. Tom Bradley came running from the back of the property, his face pale. Marcus, we have a problem. Someone got into the hangar last night. Marcus sprinted toward the hidden building, his bad legs screaming in protest. When he reached the doors, he stopped cold. The twin Mustang's engine cowlings had been removed, and the wiring inside was a tangled mess of cut cables and destroyed components. They sabotaged her, Dorothy said, arriving behind him. Her voice shook with fury. Those bastards destroyed months of work in one night. Tyler examined the damage, his mechanical knowledge evident as he traced the severed wires. They knew exactly what to cut. This wasn't random vandalism. They targeted the ignition system, the fuel lines, the electrical connections. This plane isn't going anywhere. Marcus checked the other aircraft. The P-51 appeared untouched, but the experimental Tiger Cat had suffered similar damage. Only Betty's Dream remained flyable. They left one plane, Marcus said quietly. Why? Sarah looked up from her laptop, her face grim. Because one plane isn't enough evidence. A single restored warbird can be dismissed as a curiosity. but 3 planes all with documented histories connecting them to Project Nightfall. That's proof of a systematic cover-up. So they destroyed the evidence. Not destroyed. Delayed. The damage is extensive, but it's repairable. They're buying time. Marcus's phone rang. Victor Crane? Good morning, Mr. Cole. I trust you've discovered our little gift. You're going to pay for this. Bold words from a man who just lost 2/3 of his evidence. Let me make this simple. You have 1 flyable aircraft. 1. And I have people inside the FAA who can ground that plane with a single phone call. Safety concerns, maintenance violations. Pick your excuse. You can't stop us from going public with what we know. Can't I? Crane's voice was ice. Senator Mercer has contacts at every major news network. 1 call from his office, and your story becomes a conspiracy theory pushed by a disgruntled veteran with PTSD. Who do you think people will believe, a decorated senator with 30 years of public service or a broken Navy SEAL who inherited a junkyard? Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. The truth will come out. The truth is whatever powerful people say it is. You should have learned that by now. Crane paused. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm giving you 1 final opportunity. Walk away. Take your son, leave the property, and forget any of this ever happened. In exchange, I'll ensure the remaining aircraft is preserved in a private collection. The planes live, you live, everyone wins. And the truth dies. The truth died 70 years ago, Mr. Cole. You're just refusing to accept it. Marcus looked at the sabotaged aircraft, at the veterans who had gathered to help him at his son, standing beside the P-51 with determination in his eyes. No deal. The line went dead. Dorothy approached, having heard enough to understand. He's not going to stop. I know. What do we do? Marcus turned to face the crowd of supporters who had gathered in the hangar. Old men and women who had served their country, who understood sacrifice, who refused to let history be erased. We fly Betty's dream. Today. Now. We get her in the air where everyone can see her, and we tell the world what she represents. Colonel Patterson stepped forward. The FAA won't ground a plane that's already airborne. Once she's in the sky, Crane loses his leverage. Can we do it? Marcus asked Dorothy. Can you fly her? Dorothy's eyes lit up with fierce determination. Son, I've been waiting 80 years for this moment. Let's give those bastards something to remember. The next 3 hours were controlled chaos. Tom Bradley led a team of mechanics in a final pre-flight inspection of the P-51. Sarah coordinated with media contacts, arranging for news helicopters to capture the flight. Tyler helped fuel the aircraft, his hands steady despite the danger they all faced. At 2:15, Marcus received a call from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, this is Senator Richard Mercer. Marcus felt ice run through his veins. Senator. Jeez. I understand you've been causing problems for some of my associates. I wanted to speak with you directly before this situation escalates further. Escalates? Your people sabotaged my property and threatened my family. I have no knowledge of any such actions. What I do know is that you're in possession of aircraft that contain classified military technology. Technology that, if made public, could compromise national security. That's a lie, and you know it. What I know, Mr. Cole, is that your grandfather was a thief and a traitor. He stole government property and spent 60 years evading justice. Whatever fantasies you've constructed about heroic preservation, the facts remain. Those aircraft belong to the United States government. Marcus's voice was steady. Those aircraft were legally purchased from military surplus in 1946. I have the documentation to prove it. Documentation can be interpreted in many ways. I have lawyers who specialize in such interpretations. And I have witnesses, veterans, historians, journalists, people who know the truth about Project Nightfall and what your father did to cover it up. The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. My father was a patriot who served his country with honor. Your father was a fraud who let defense contractors steal millions of dollars while soldiers flew defective equipment into combat. Men died because of him, and you've spent your entire career protecting that legacy. You have no proof. I have 3 aircraft that your father tried to destroy. I have documentation of the cover-up, and in about 2 hours I'm going to have the attention of every news network in the country. Senator Mercer's voice dropped to a whisper. You don't understand what you're doing. There are forces at work here that go far beyond a 70-year-old scandal. People who will do anything to protect their interests. Including murder. I'm trying to save your life, Mr. Cole. Walk away now while you still can. The way my grandfather walked away. The way Esteban Salazar walked away after he spent 2 years in Leavenworth for doing the right thing. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. No, I'm not walking away. I'm finishing what they started. Then you've signed your own death warrant. The line went dead. Marcus lowered the phone and found Tyler watching him. Who was that? Senator Mercer. He just threatened to have me killed. Tyler's face went pale, but his voice was steady. Then we'd better move fast. At 3 o'clock, Dorothy climbed into the cockpit of Betty's Dream. The crowd of supporters had grown to over 50 people, many of them filming with phones and cameras. News vans were parked along the road outside the property. Helicopters circled overhead. Marcus stood beside the aircraft as Dorothy completed her pre-flight checks. How are you feeling? Dorothy grinned, and for a moment she looked like the 22-year-old pilot who had ferried fighters across the country 80 years ago. Like I'm about to make history, again. Be careful up there. Careful is for people who have something to lose. I've been waiting my whole life for this moment. She pulled on her flight helmet. Tell your grandfather I'm bringing his bird home. The P-51's Merlin engine roared to life and the crowd erupted in cheers. Veterans saluted, cameras flashed. The propeller spun, creating a windstorm that sent dust swirling across the desert. Marcus stepped back as the aircraft began to move, taxiing toward the improvised runway they had cleared through the junkyard. Betty's Dream rolled forward with mechanical precision, every system functioning exactly as designed. Dorothy's voice crackled over the radio. Betty's Dream requesting permission to depart. Marcus keyed his handheld. Permission granted. Godspeed, Dorothy. The P-51 accelerated down the runway, its engine screaming with power. At the halfway point, the nose lifted. At 3/4, the wheels left the ground. And then Betty's Dream was airborne. The crowd cheered as the aircraft climbed into the Arizona sky, its polished aluminum skin catching the afternoon sunlight like a silver arrow. 70 years of silence ended with that single flight, and Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. She's beautiful, Tyler whispered, standing beside his father. She's free, Marcus replied. Finally free. For 10 glorious minutes, Dorothy flew circuits over the junkyard, dipping her wings in salute to the crowd below. News helicopters captured every moment. Live feeds broadcast the historic flight to millions of viewers across the country. Then everything went wrong. At 3:22, Marcus noticed a black helicopter approaching from the east. It wasn't a news chopper, it was military, fast. And it was heading straight for Betty's Dream. Dorothy, you've got company. Black helicopter, 3 o'clock. I see him. Dorothy's voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the tension beneath it. He's trying to force me down. Can you outrun him? In a P-51, son, this bird was built to outrun anything in the sky. Dorothy pushed the throttle forward, and Betty's Dream accelerated with a surge of power that left the helicopter struggling to keep up. But the pursuit helicopter was faster than Marcus expected, closing the gap with determined precision. They're not going to give up, Dorothy reported. And I can't keep this speed forever. The engine hasn't been pushed this hard in decades. Marcus's mind raced. They needed to get the aircraft on the ground, somewhere safe, somewhere with witnesses, somewhere Crane's people couldn't reach. Dorothy, head for Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. It's 30 miles south. They can't touch you on a military installation. Copy that. Turning south. The P-51 banked gracefully and headed toward Tucson. The pursuit helicopter followed, but it was losing ground now. Betty's Dream was in her element, flying fast and free. At 3:38, Dorothy's voice came over the radio again. I've got the base in sight, requesting emergency landing clearance. A new voice responded. Air Force Tower. Unknown aircraft, identify yourself and state your emergency. This is Betty's Dream civilian registration November 44887. I'm being pursued by an unmarked helicopter, requesting immediate landing clearance and security assistance. A long pause. Then, Betty's Dream, you are cleared for runway 24 left. Emergency crews are standing by. Marcus held his breath as Dorothy lined up for approach. The pursuit helicopter was still behind her, but it was falling back now. Even Crane's people wouldn't dare follow onto an active military base. At 3:45, Betty's Dream touched down on the runway at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, the first World War II fighter to land there in over half a century. The crowd at the junkyard erupted in celebration. Tyler grabbed his father in a fierce embrace. She made it! Dad, she made it! Marcus hugged his son back, feeling something crack open in his chest. She did it. She actually did it. But the celebration was short-lived. At 4:15, Marcus received a call from Sarah Chen. We have a problem. The FAA just issued an emergency grounding order for the aircraft. They're claiming mechanical deficiencies and safety violations. They can't do that. The plane is on a military base. They're not grounding the plane. They're grounding you. As the registered owner, you're being held responsible for operating an unsafe aircraft. There's a warrant being issued for your arrest. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. On what charges? Reckless endangerment. Operating an unregistered aircraft. Violation of federal aviation regulations. Sarah's voice was tight with anger. It's all fabricated, but Crane has people inside the FAA. He's using the system against you. How long do I have? Local police are already on their way to the junkyard, maybe 20 minutes. Marcus looked around at the crowd of supporters, at the veterans and historians who had risked everything to help him, at Tyler, who was watching him with fear in his eyes. Dad, what do we do? Marcus made a decision. Everyone needs to leave. Now. If the police find you here, you could all be charged as accomplices. Colonel Patterson stepped forward. We're not leaving. We didn't come here to run at the first sign of trouble. This isn't trouble. This is a senator with the power to destroy lives. I won't let him hurt any of you. Son? Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. I flew 63 combat missions over Korea. I've been shot at, shot down, and left for dead in enemy territory. You think I'm afraid of some politician? The other veterans murmured in agreement. Tom Bradley spoke up. Marcus, we knew the risks when we came here. Every one of us made a choice, and we're choosing to stay. Tyler stepped beside his father. I'm staying too. Tyler, no. You said if you tell me to run, I run, but you haven't told me to run yet. You asked me to leave. That's different. Marcus stared at his son, seeing the stubborn determination that was so familiar it hurt. The same determination that had kept his grandfather guarding these planes for 60 years. The same determination that had driven Marcus through the hardest moments of his military career. Okay, he said finally. We stay. Together. At 4:32, 3 police cars pulled up to the junkyard gate. A sheriff's deputy approached his hand, resting on his weapon. Marcus Cole. That's me. Sir, I have a warrant for your arrest. You have the right to remain silent. As the deputy read him his rights, Marcus noticed something. The deputy's hands were shaking. His voice was uncertain. He kept glancing at the crowd of elderly veterans watching him with hard eyes. Deputy, Marcus said calmly, do you know what you're doing? I'm following orders, sir. Do you know who those orders came from? Do you know why a decorated senator is so desperate to silence a bunch of old veterans and a pile of antique airplanes? The deputy hesitated. Sir, I just do what I'm told. So did a lot of people in 1946. They followed orders and destroyed aircraft that represented the courage of young men who died for their country. They covered up fraud that cost American lives. They let the guilty go free while innocent men went to prison. Marcus held out his wrists. You can arrest me. You can take me away in handcuffs. But you can't stop the truth from coming out. Not anymore. The deputy stood frozen, shift clearly torn between duty and doubt. Before he could make a decision, a new vehicle pulled up, a black sedan with government plates. A woman emerged tall and commanding, wearing a suit that screamed federal authority. Deputy, stand down. Ma'am, the woman flashed a badge. Special Agent Karen Williams, FBI. This investigation is now under federal jurisdiction. The deputy stepped back, confused. I wasn't told about any federal investigation. You weren't supposed to be. Williams approached Marcus, her expression unreadable. Mr. Cole, I need you to come with me. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but we have a lot to discuss. She looked at the crowd of veterans, at Tyler, at the sabotaged aircraft in the hangar. All of you, actually. Williams led Marcus to the sedan, but instead of handcuffing him, she opened the passenger door. Get in, we don't have much time. Time for what? Time to save your grandfather's legacy before Senator Mercer destroys it permanently. Marcus hesitated. How do I know I can trust you? Williams reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young man in military uniform standing beside a P-51 Mustang. The name on the plane was Lucky Lady. My grandfather flew with the Tuskegee Airmen, Williams said. He died over Germany in 1945. His plane was supposed to be preserved as a memorial, but it was scrapped instead, destroyed to hide the same fraud you've been investigating. You knew about Project Nightfall. I've been investigating Mercer for 3 years, but I never had enough evidence to move against him. She looked toward the hangar. Until now. Marcus got in the car. Williams drove him away from the junkyard, heading toward Tucson. Senator Mercer has been running a shadow operation for decades, protecting his father's legacy by suppressing any evidence of the 1946 scandal. Crane is his fixer. Whenever someone gets too close to the truth, Crane makes the problem disappear. How many people have disappeared? Officially, none. Unofficially, at least 6 that I know of. Collectors, historians, veterans who tried to come forward, all died under mysterious circumstances. Your grandfather was on that list for years, but he was too careful, too well protected by his network of contacts. So Mercer waited until he died, and then moved on his grandson. But Mercer made a mistake. He underestimated you. Williams glanced at Marcus. You're the first person to actually fly one of those planes. The first person to get media attention before Mercer could shut it down. Dorothy flew the plane, not me. Dorothy Hayes, 84 years old, former WASP pilot. Do you know how many followers she gained in the last 2 hours? Over 100,000. Her flight is trending on every social media platform. Mercer can't bury this story anymore. Marcus felt hope rising in his chest. So it's over. We won? Not yet. Mercer still has resources. He's already working to discredit everyone involved. Claiming the planes are forgeries, that the documentation is fabricated, that you're a disgruntled veteran with mental health issues. How do we stop him? Williams pulled the car to a stop and turned to face Marcus. We need testimony, not just documents, not just aircraft. We need someone who was there in 1946, someone who can speak directly about what happened. Everyone from 1946 is dead. Not everyone. Williams pulled out another photograph. An old man, frail and weathered, sitting in a wheelchair. Esteban Salazar. He's 97 years old. He's been living in a nursing home in El Paso for the past 15 years. Marcus stared at the photograph. He's still alive. Barely. He has maybe 6 months left, but his mind is still sharp, and he's been waiting for someone to come and hear his story. Why hasn't anyone interviewed him before? Because Mercer's people have been monitoring him for decades. Anyone who gets too close gets warned off. Or worse? Williams' expression hardened. But I think a Navy SEAL might be able to handle whatever they throw at him. When do we leave? Now. But there's something else you need to know. Williams hesitated. Salazar doesn't just have testimony. He has documents. Original documents from 1946. Evidence that was supposed to be destroyed, but he managed to hide before his court-martial. Evidence of what? Everything. The fraud, the cover-up, the names of everyone involved, including Robert Mercer. Marcus felt his heart pounding. That would be enough to take down the senator. More than enough. That's why Crane has men watching Salazar's nursing home around the clock. Getting in won't be easy. Marcus thought about his training, his skills, everything he had learned in 20 years of military service. He thought about his grandfather, who had spent 60 years waiting for someone to finish what he started. He thought about Tyler, who had finally begun to understand what family legacy really meant. Easy is overrated, Marcus said. Let's go. Williams turned the car toward El Paso. Behind them, the Arizona sun was setting over the junkyard, where 3 aircraft waited in the darkness. One of them was flying again. One of them carried secrets that could change history, and one of them held the key to finally exposing the truth. Somewhere in Washington, Senator Richard Mercer was making phone calls trying to contain the damage, trying to silence the voices that were growing louder by the hour. But he was too late. The truth was already in motion, and Marcus Cole was about to finish what his grandfather started 70 years ago. At 9:47 that night, they crossed the Texas border. Williams drove while Marcus called Tyler on a burner phone she had provided. Dad, where are you? The FBI took over the investigation. They're not arresting anyone, but they're not letting us leave either. I'm heading to El Paso. There's someone I need to talk to. Who? Esteban Salazar, the man who helped your great-grandfather save those planes. Tyler was silent for a moment. He's still alive. Barely, but he has evidence that could end this. I need you to stay there and keep everyone calm. Can you do that? I can do it, but Dad, be careful. I will, and Tyler. Yeah, I'm proud of you. The line was quiet. Then, thanks, Dad. I'm proud of you too. Marcus ended the call and stared out the window at the darkness rushing past. Somewhere out there, enemies were mobilizing. Somewhere out there, powerful men were planning his destruction. But for the first time in months, Marcus felt like he knew exactly who he was and what he was fighting for. Tell me about Salazar, he said to Williams. He was a master mechanic, best in the Army Air Force. When he saw what was happening after the war, the fraud, the destruction of evidence, he couldn't stay silent. He and your grandfather developed a plan to save the most important aircraft and document everything they found. And they got caught. Salazar took the fall. He confessed to falsifying transportation records, but he never revealed your grandfather's involvement. He spent 2 years in Leavenworth to protect the mission. Marcus felt a surge of respect for a man he had never met. He sacrificed everything. He believed some things were worth sacrificing for. The question is whether you believe the same thing. I do. Williams glanced at him. Good, because what we're about to do might cost you everything you have left. At 11:15, they arrived at the nursing home in El Paso. It was a modest facility, clean but worn. Williams parked in the shadow of a neighboring building and pointed to a black SUV in the lot. Crane's men. They've been watching around the clock. How many? 2 in the vehicle, probably 2 more inside posing as staff or visitors. Marcus studied the building, mapping entry points and exit routes. Can you get them to leave? I can create a distraction, draw them away for maybe 15 minutes. That's not much time. It's all we've got. Williams pulled out her phone and made a call. Marcus watched as the SUV's occupants received a message, conferred briefly, and then drove away. What did you tell them? That someone spotted Cole at the Phoenix airport. They'll figure out it's a false lead in about 20 minutes. Move. Marcus moved. He entered the nursing home through a side door, avoiding the main entrance. The hallways were quiet at this hour, dimly lit and smelling of antiseptic. He found Salazar's room on the second floor, just where Williams had said it would be. The old man was awake, sitting up in bed with a book open on his lap. When Marcus entered, Salazar looked up with eyes that were surprisingly sharp. You're Williams' grandson. How did you know? You look just like him. Same jaw, same eyes, same stubborn expression. Salazar closed the book. I've been waiting for you. 70 years I've been waiting. Marcus pulled a chair beside the bed. Tell me everything. And Salazar did. He spoke of the war, of the young men who flew and died, of the aircraft that carried their spirits. He spoke of the fraud, the corrupt contractors, the military officers who looked the other way while soldiers flew defective equipment into combat. He spoke of Robert Mercer, the bureaucrat who had orchestrated the destruction of evidence, who had sent innocent men to prison while the guilty prospered. And he spoke of William Cole, the quiet mechanic who had refused to let history be erased. Your grandfather was a hero, Salazar said, his voice cracking with emotion. He could have walked away. He could have kept his head down and protected himself, but he chose to fight, even when it cost him everything. He lost his family because of it. He never saw my father grow up. He missed my mother's funeral because he couldn't leave those planes unguarded. He did what he believed was right. That's all any of us can do. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. I didn't understand. For years I thought he was just a crazy old man who loved junk more than his family. He loved his family more than anything. That's why he stayed. He wanted to leave you something worth inheriting, something that would matter. Salazar reached beneath his pillow and pulled out a worn leather folder. Take this. Everything is inside. Names, dates, documents. Everything Robert Mercer tried to destroy. Marcus took the folder with trembling hands. This is it, the evidence. The original evidence. Copies were destroyed decades ago. This is all that's left. Salazar gripped Marcus's arm with surprising strength. Finish what we started. Make their sacrifice mean something. I will. Footsteps in the hallway. Voices. Crane's men were returning. Marcus stood. I have to go. I know. Salazar smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young man he had been 80 years ago. Tell Dorothy I said hello. Tell her the birds are finally going home. Marcus slipped out of the room just as 2 men in dark suits rounded the corner. He ducked into a supply closet, holding his breath as they passed. He waited 30 seconds, then made his way back to the side entrance. Williams was waiting in the car. Did you get it? Marcus held up the folder. Everything we need. Then let's go. We've got a long drive ahead of us. As they pulled away from the nursing home, Marcus looked back at the building where an old man waited to die, knowing that his life's work was finally complete. Esteban Salazar had waited 70 years for this moment, and Marcus Cole was not going to let him down. They were 40 miles outside El Paso when the first bullets hit the car. Williams swerved hard. The sedan fishtailing on the dark highway. Get down! Marcus ducked as the rear window exploded inward, showering him with glass. Behind them, 2 black SUVs were closing fast, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predator eyes. How did they find us? Tracker on the car. I should have checked. Williams floored the accelerator. Hold on. The sedan lurched forward, engine screaming, but the SUVs were faster, designed for pursuit. Within seconds, they were alongside trying to force Williams off the road. Marcus grabbed the folder of evidence and stuffed it inside his jacket. "We can't outrun them." "I know." Williams yanked the wheel, sideswiping the nearest SUV. Metal shrieked against metal. "There's a truck stop 2 miles ahead. Lots of witnesses. They won't risk a public confrontation." Another burst of gunfire. The front tire blew out and the sedan started to spin. Williams fought for control, but the car was already leaving the road. Marcus braced himself as they hit the desert, the impact throwing him against the door. The sedan rolled once-twice, then came to rest on its side. "Williams!" No answer. Marcus kicked out the shattered windshield and crawled free. Williams was unconscious, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. He pulled her from the wreckage just as the SUVs pulled up. 4 men emerged, all armed, all moving with the precision of trained operators. "Mr. Cole," the lead man's voice was calm, almost friendly. "You've caused a lot of trouble tonight. Hand over the documents and this ends peacefully." Marcus lowered Williams to the ground and straightened up. His bad leg was screaming, his ribs felt cracked, and he had no weapon, but he had faced worse odds. "You're going to have to come and get them." The lead man sighed. "I was hoping you'd say that."
"18일."
He raised his weapon. A shot rang out, but it didn't come from the man's gun. It came from somewhere behind Marcus. The lead man dropped, clutching his shoulder. More shots. The other 3 men scattered, taking cover behind their vehicles. Marcus spun around and saw a pickup truck racing toward them, its headlights blazing. Through the windshield, he glimpsed a familiar face. Colonel Patterson. The old veteran brought the truck to a skidding stop between Marcus and the attackers. "Get in?" Marcus lifted Williams and threw her into the truck bed, then vaulted in after her. Patterson floored it before Marcus had even landed. "How did you find us?" Tyler called. "Said the FBI agent took you to El Paso." Patterson was driving with one hand, the other holding a vintage M1911 pistol. "I've been tracking your phone since you left the junkyard. You've been following me." "Son, I didn't fly 63 combat missions to let some punk senator take out a fellow American. When I commit to a fight, I commit all the way." Behind them, the SUVs were regrouping. But Patterson knew the desert better than any city operative. He took the truck off-road, navigating dry washes and rocky terrain with the skill of someone who had spent a lifetime in this landscape. By the time the SUVs gave up pursuit, they were 30 miles from the highway with no sign of followers. At 3:15 in the morning, they reached a small airfield outside Las Cruces. Patterson pulled the truck into a hangar where a twin-engine Beechcraft waited. "I called in some favors. This bird will get us back to Tucson in 2 hours." Williams was regaining consciousness. "Where are we, Ann?" "Somewhere safe." Marcus helped her out of the truck. "Can you fly?" "Can I fly, son? I was doing carrier landings when your father was in diapers." Patterson was already completing his pre-flight checks. "Get in, we don't have much time." They were airborne by 3:30, flying low over the desert to avoid radar detection. Williams sat in the co-pilot seat, her head bandaged with a strip torn from Marcus's shirt. The leather folder lay in Marcus's lap, its contents representing 70 years of hidden truth. "Crane will know we escaped," Williams said. "He'll be expecting us at the junkyard." "Then we don't go to the junkyard." Marcus pulled out his phone. "We go somewhere he can't touch us." He dialed Tom Bradley's number. "Marcus? Thank God, we've been trying to reach you for hours." "I have the evidence. Everything Salazar kept hidden since 1946. "That's incredible, but we have a problem. Crane's men are everywhere. They've surrounded the property. No one can get in or out." "What about Dorothy?" "She's still at Davis-Monthan. The Air Force won't release the plane without proper authorization, and someone's been blocking every request." Marcus thought fast. "Can you get a message to her?" "I think so. Why?" "Tell her we're going to fly. All 3 planes. Together, tomorrow morning." Marcus, 2 of those planes were sabotaged. They can't fly. "They can if we repair them tonight." "That's impossible. The damage would take weeks to fix." Marcus looked at Patterson, who was listening intently. "Colonel, you said you flew F-86s in Korea. Do you know anyone who can work on World War II fighters?" Patterson grinned. "Son, I know a dozen men who've been restoring warbirds for 50 years. Give me 1 hour and I'll have the best mechanics in the Southwest converging on that junkyard." "Do it." Marcus turned back to the phone. "Tom, we're landing in Tucson in 90 minutes. Have everyone ready. We're going to repair those planes, fly them at dawn, and show the world what William Cole spent his life protecting." "And Crane's men?" "Let me worry about Crane." At 5:45 in the morning, Patterson's Beechcraft touched down at a private airstrip south of Tucson. Tyler was waiting with Sarah Chen in a convoy of vehicles. The boy ran to his father as soon as Marcus emerged from the plane. "Dad, I thought you were dead. When Williams didn't check in, we thought..." "I'm okay." Marcus hugged his son fiercely. "We're all okay." "Did you get it, the evidence?" Marcus held up the leather folder. "Everything. Names, dates, documents. Proof of everything Mercer's father did." Sarah took the folder with trembling hands. "This is incredible. Original procurement records, falsified destruction certificates, internal memos discussing the cover-up. This is enough to bring down senators generals, maybe even more." "Then let's make sure the world sees it." Marcus looked at the assembled group. "What's the situation at the junkyard?" Tom Bradley stepped forward. "Crane has about 20 men surrounding the property. They're not letting anyone in or out. The media has been pushed back to the main road, but Patterson's mechanics are already there. They've been working on the sabotaged planes all night." "How bad is the damage?" "Bad, but they've made progress. The twin Mustang might be flyable by sunrise. The Tiger Cat is still questionable." "And Dorothy?" "She's been raising hell at Davis-Monthan. The base commander finally agreed to release Betty's Dream at 0600, but she needs an escort to get past Crane's blockade." Marcus checked his watch. It was 5:52. "We have 8 minutes. How do we get her out?" Williams, who had been conferring with local FBI agents, approached. "I have an idea. The Air Force won't release the plane to a civilian, but they'll release it to federal law enforcement as evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Can you do that?" "I just did. Betty's Dream is now officially FBI property, and I'm commandeering it for immediate transport to the crime scene." Marcus felt a surge of hope. "That gets Dorothy and the plane out of the base, but how do we get past Crane's men?" "We don't go past them." Tyler spoke up, his voice steady. "We go over them." "What do you mean? Dad, think about it. Crane's men are watching the roads, the gates, the obvious entry points. But they're not watching the sky. If Dorothy flies Betty's Dream directly to the junkyard and lands on the runway we cleared, they can't stop her without shooting down an FBI aircraft. Which would be an act of terrorism against the federal government." Williams smiled grimly. "Even Mercer can't protect them from that." Marcus looked at his son with new appreciation. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher, even if he wasn't around much." At 6:03, Dorothy Hayes received clearance to depart Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Marcus listened to the radio chatter from the convoy heading toward the junkyard. He was in the lead vehicle with Tyler and Williams, while Patterson and his mechanics followed in a caravan of trucks loaded with tools and parts. "Betty's Dream, you are cleared for departure. Godspeed, ma'am." Dorothy's voice crackled over the radio, strong and clear, despite the static. "Thank you, Tower. It's been an honor. See you in the history books." The P-51's engine roared to life. Marcus imagined the sound echoing across the desert, a declaration of defiance that had been 70 years in the making. "Betty's Dream is airborne," Sarah reported from her position monitoring the radio frequencies. "ETA to the junkyard is 12 minutes. "What about Crane's response?" "They're scrambling. I'm picking up chatter on their frequencies. They didn't expect this." Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Crane had planned for every contingency except the one that mattered most. He had underestimated the courage of ordinary people who refused to be intimidated. At 6:15, they reached the perimeter of Crane's blockade. The SUVs were positioned in a rough semicircle around the junkyard entrance, their occupants watching the roads with weapons barely concealed. But as Marcus had predicted, they were focused on the ground, not the sky. "Hold here," Williams ordered. She stepped out of the vehicle and approached the nearest SUV, her FBI badge held high. "Special Agent Williams, you're interfering with a federal investigation. Stand down immediately." The lead operative stepped out to meet her. "We have authorization from the Department of Defense to secure this property." "Show me." "I don't have to show you anything." "Then you don't have authorization." Williams's voice was ice. "You have 10 seconds to clear this area, or I will have every one of you arrested for obstruction of justice." "You don't have the authority." "I have the authority of the United States government. What do you have?" Before the man could respond, a sound filled the air. A sound that made everyone freeze and look up. The unmistakable roar of a Merlin engine. Betty's Dream appeared over the eastern horizon, flying low and fast, her polished aluminum skin catching the first rays of sunrise. She banked gracefully and lined up for approach to the junkyard's improvised runway. Crane's operatives watched in stunned silence as the P-51 touched down, rolling to a stop inside the property they had been trying to secure. Williams smiled. "That aircraft is now federal evidence. Anyone who interferes with its recovery will be charged with obstruction of a federal investigation. Are we clear? The lead operative reached for his radio. Sir, we have a situation. Marcus didn't wait to hear the response. He drove the convoy through the gap Williams had created past the bewildered operatives and into the junkyard. Dorothy was climbing out of Betty's dream when they arrived. She pulled off her helmet and grinned at Marcus. Did you see their faces? I haven't had that much fun since I buzzed a Navy destroyer in 1944. You're amazing. I'm 84 years old, and I just flew a World War II fighter into a hostile zone. Amazing doesn't begin to cover it. Patterson's mechanics were already swarming over the sabotaged aircraft, their years of experience evident in every precise movement. Tom Bradley coordinated the effort, directing teams to the Twin Mustang and the Tiger Cat with military efficiency. Status report, Marcus demanded. The Twin Mustang's electrical system is almost repaired. We found the cut wires and spliced them. She'll need about 2 more hours of work, but she should be flyable. And the Tiger Cat, Tom hesitated. That's more complicated. The fuel system was damaged. We're working on it, but I can't guarantee anything. Marcus looked at the experimental prototype, the rarest of his grandfather's treasures. Do your best. We fly at 8 o'clock with whatever we have. At 6:45, Senator Mercer called. Marcus answered the phone with Williams and Sarah listening on speaker. Mr. Cole. Mercer's voice was strained, the smooth politician's tone replaced by something raw and desperate. This has gone far enough. I'm prepared to make you an offer. I'm listening. Full immunity from prosecution, $5 million in a private account, the aircraft donated to a museum of your choosing. All you have to do is hand over Salazar's documents and agree to never speak publicly about Project Nightfall. That's a generous offer. It's more than generous. It's the best deal you'll ever receive. Yes, and what happens to the people who died because of your father's fraud? The pilots who flew defective equipment? The veterans who spent their lives being called crazy because they knew the truth? Mercer was silent for a moment. That was a long time ago. The people responsible are dead. What's the point of destroying careers and reputations over mistakes that can't be undone? The point is justice. The point is making sure it never happens again. Marcus's voice hardened. Your father let innocent men go to prison. He destroyed evidence that could have saved lives. And you've spent 30 years continuing the cover-up. That ends today. You're making a mistake. No, Senator, you made the mistake. 70 years ago when your father chose corruption over honor. Everything that's happening now is just the consequences finally catching up. Marcus ended the call. Williams nodded approvingly. That was recorded, every word. Good. Add it to the evidence file. At 7:30, the first news helicopters arrived. Word had spread through social media about the standoff at the junkyard. Hashtags like #WildBillsPlanes and Project Nightfall were trending nationally. Cable news networks were interrupting their morning programming to cover the developing story. Sarah had been feeding information to journalists all night. Now the results were becoming visible. Trucks from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and a dozen local stations were lined up along the road outside the property. Reporters were broadcasting live, their cameras pointed at the hangar, where mechanics worked frantically to repair the damaged aircraft. Marcus found Tyler helping with the Tiger Cat's fuel system, his hands black with grease, but his eyes bright with purpose. How's it going? We found the leak. Mr. Patterson's guys are sealing it now. They think she'll be ready. And you, how are you holding up? Tyler looked at his father, and Marcus saw something he hadn't seen in years. Trust, respect, maybe even love. I'm good, Dad. This is what you were fighting for all those years, isn't it, when you were deployed, when you missed birthdays and holidays? You were fighting to protect things like this, things that matter. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I was fighting because I believed in something. I just forgot how to explain it. You don't have to explain anymore. I get it now. Father and son stood together in the hangar, surrounded by the legacy of 3 generations of Coles. Outside, the world was watching. Inside, mechanics worked to bring history back to life. At 7:55, Tom Bradley made his report. Betty's dream is fully operational. The Twin Mustang is ready to fly, but the Tiger Cat... He shook his head. We did everything we could. The fuel system is patched, but I can't guarantee it'll hold under stress. Flying her is a risk. Marcus looked at the experimental prototype. His grandfather had risked everything to save this aircraft. Esteban Salazar had gone to prison rather than reveal its location. Generations of sacrifice, all leading to this moment. Who's going to fly her? Commander Jack Morrison stepped forward. He was in his 60s, a retired Navy test pilot who had arrived with Patterson's group during the night. I've flown more experimental aircraft than I can count. If anyone can handle her quirks, it's me. You understand the risks, Morrison smiled. Mr. Cole, I've spent my whole life preparing for a moment like this. My grandfather died flying a plane just like these. If I go down doing the same thing, that's not a tragedy, that's an honor. Marcus shook his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if we can make history first. At 8:02, 3 World War II aircraft sat on the improvised runway, their engines warming up. Dorothy Hayes was in Betty's dream, her hands steady on the controls despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Tom Bradley had taken the twin Mustang, his decades of restoration experience making him the natural choice for the temperamental aircraft. And Jack Morrison sat in the Tiger Cat's cockpit monitoring gauges that hadn't been read in 70 years. Marcus stood at the edge of the runway with Tyler beside him. Around them, hundreds of people had gathered. Veterans, historians, journalists, ordinary citizens who had heard the story and come to witness history. The media helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing every moment for millions of viewers around the world. Williams approached with her phone in hand. You need to see this. She showed him a news feed. The headline read, Senator Mercer resigns amid fraud allegations. Below it, another headline, FBI arrests Victor Crane on multiple federal charges. Marcus felt something release in his chest, something he had been carrying for weeks, maybe years. It's over. Mercer's office released a statement 20 minutes ago. He's stepping down effective immediately. The documents Salazar kept have been verified by 3 independent experts. The cover-up is collapsing. And Crane, in custody. He tried to flee to Mexico, but Border Patrol was waiting. William smiled grimly. He's facing charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and about a dozen other felonies. He'll never see the outside of a prison again. Marcus looked up at the 3 aircraft waiting to fly. Then let's give them something to remember. He keyed his radio. Betty's Dream Desert Fox Nightfall 1. You are cleared for departure. Dorothy's voice came back immediately. Copy that ground. Betty's Dream rolling. The P-51 accelerated down the runway, its Merlin engine producing the distinctive roar that had once filled the skies over Europe. At the halfway point, the nose lifted. At 3/4, the wheels left the ground. Betty's Dream was airborne. The crowd erupted in cheers as the twin Mustang followed its twin engines, harmonizing in a sound that hadn't been heard in over half a century. Tom Bradley's voice crackled over the radio. Desert Fox is up, all systems nominal. Finally, the Tiger Cat began its takeoff roll. This was the moment of greatest uncertainty. The fuel system patch might hold or it might fail catastrophically. No one knew for sure. Marcus held his breath as the prototype accelerated. Faster! Faster! The nose lifted, and the Tiger Cat soared into the Arizona sky. Nightfall 1 is airborne, Morrison reported. She's handling beautifully. Your grandfather knew what he was doing when he saved this bird. 3 aircraft climbed in formation above the junkyard, their shapes silhouetted against the morning sun. They banked in perfect synchronization, creating a sight that connected the present to a past when such formations had been common when young men had flown into combat, knowing they might never return. Tyler gripped his father's arm. Dad, look at them. Marcus was crying. He didn't try to hide it. I see them, son. I see them. The formation flew a wide circle over the property, then headed toward Tucson. News helicopters followed, broadcasting the historic flight to a watching world. On the ground, veterans saluted. Families cheered. Complete strangers embraced united by the spectacle of courage and sacrifice made manifest in aluminum and engine oil. At 8:22, Dorothy's voice came over the radio with a message that would be replayed millions of times in the days to come. This is Betty's dream to anyone listening. 70 years ago, young men flew aircraft like this into battle to protect everything we hold dear. Some of them never came home. Their names are forgotten, their stories untold, but their courage lives on in every rivet, every wire, every piece of aluminum skin that still carries the marks of their sacrifice. Her voice grew stronger, filled with emotion that transcended the crackle of radio static. Today, we fly for them, for Charlie Morrison, who died over Berlin in 1945, for the 38 WASP pilots who gave their lives serving a country that wouldn't even give them military status until decades later, for Esteban Salazar, who spent 2 years in prison rather than betray his principles, and for William Cole, who spent 60 years protecting these aircraft because he believed that some things are worth more than money, more than comfort, more than life itself. Dorothy paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Welcome home, boys. Your long watch is finally over. Domingue, The 3 aircraft flew in formation over downtown Tucson, dipping their wings in salute to the crowd that had gathered in the streets below. Traffic stopped. People emerged from buildings. Children pointed at the sky, asking their parents what they were seeing. And the parents, many of them learning the story for the first time through their phones, tried to explain that they were watching history, that somewhere above them, an 84-year-old woman and 2 veteran pilots were completing a mission that had begun before most of them were born. At 8:45, the formation returned to the junkyard. Landing was the most dangerous part of any flight. 3 aircraft, 2 of them having not flown in 70 years, coming down on an improvised runway with the world watching. Betty's dream landed first, Dorothy bringing the P-51 down with the practiced grace of someone who had made thousands of such landings in her youth. The crowd cheered as the aircraft rolled to a stop and cheered again when Dorothy emerged from the cockpit with her fist raised in triumph. The twin Mustang followed Tom Bradley, handling the complex aircraft with skill that drew appreciative nods from the veterans in the crowd. 2 down, 1 to go. Marcus watched as the Tiger Cat lined up for approach. "Come on," he whispered to it. "Come on." The prototype descended smoothly, Morrison's steady hands guiding it toward the runway. At 50 feet, everything looked perfect. At 20 feet, Marcus allowed himself to hope. Then something went wrong. A burst of smoke from the left engine. Morrison's voice sharp with alarm. "I've got a fuel leak. She's losing power." The Tiger Cat dropped suddenly, its left wing dipping toward the ground. For one terrible moment, Marcus was certain he was about to watch the rarest aircraft in his grandfather's collection crash and burn. But Morrison wasn't a test pilot for nothing. He corrected with lightning reflexes, nursing the dying aircraft toward the runway with a combination of skill and instinct that bordered on miraculous. The Tiger Cat touched down, hard, bounced. Once touched down, again, and rolled to a stop as the left engine sputtered and died. Marcus ran toward the aircraft, arriving just as Morrison climbed out of the cockpit. The pilot's face was pale, but he was grinning. "That," Morrison said, "was the best flight of my life." Emergency crews swarmed around the Tiger Cat, but the damage was minimal. The fuel patch had held long enough. His grandfather's treasure had survived. Marcus turned to find Tyler standing beside him. The boy was looking at the 3 aircraft, at the crowd of supporters, at the media crews, broadcasting their story to the world. "We did it, Dad." Marcus put his arm around his son's shoulders. "We did it together." At 9:15, Marcus stood before a crowd of reporters. Williams had helped him prepare a statement, but when he opened his mouth, he found himself setting aside the prepared words and speaking from the heart instead. 70 years ago, my grandfather made a choice. He could have followed orders and let these aircraft be destroyed. He could have protected his career and his reputation. Instead, he chose to protect something he believed was more important, the memory of brave men who gave everything for their country. He paused, gathering his thoughts. William Cole spent 60 years guarding these planes. He lost his family, his reputation, and any hope of a normal life. People called him crazy. They called him a hoarder, a hermit, a fool. But he wasn't any of those things. He was a guardian, a protector of history that powerful men wanted erased. Marcus looked at Dorothy, at Tom Bradley, at Jack Morrison, at the veterans and historians who had risked everything to help him. Today, we honored his sacrifice. But this isn't just about my grandfather or these aircraft or even the scandal they represent. It's about what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. It's about the courage to stand up for truth when powerful people want to bury it. He took a deep breath. My grandfather's war is finally over, but the war for truth, for justice, for honoring those who sacrificed everything, that war never ends. And as long as there are people willing to fight, we will never let the memory of heroes be erased. The crowd applauded. Later, Marcus would learn that his speech had been broadcast live to over 12 million viewers. It would be shared millions more times on social media. It would inspire documentaries, books, and eventually a feature film about the Cole family and their remarkable legacy. But in that moment, standing in the desert sun with his son beside him and his grandfather's aircraft behind him, Marcus Cole wasn't thinking about fame or recognition. He was thinking about a letter written by an old man who had spent 60 years waiting for someone to understand. Some things are worth more than money. They're worth preserving for the generations who will never know the sound of freedom flying overhead. Marcus finally understood. And as he looked at Tyler, seeing the same stubborn determination that had driven 4 generations of Coles, he knew the legacy would continue. Not in aircraft or documents or media coverage. In family. In memory. In the unbreakable bond between fathers and sons who choose to fight for something larger than themselves. At 11:30 that morning, Marcus received a phone call. Mr. Cole, this is Captain James Wright at Brooke Army Medical Center. I'm calling about Esteban Salazar. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Is he... He passed away about an hour ago, peacefully in his sleep. Wright paused. But before he went, he asked the nurses to turn on the television. He watched the whole flight. The formation, the landing, your speech. He was smiling when he closed his eyes. Marcus couldn't speak. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, too heavy for words. There's one more thing, Wright continued. He left a message for you. He said, tell William's grandson that the birds finally flew home. Tell him the mission is complete. Marcus ended the call and stood in silence for a long moment. Tyler approached, sensing something was wrong. Dad, Esteban Salazar died this morning. Oh no. He saw the flight. He saw everything. Marcus wiped his eyes. He said the mission is complete. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made Marcus's heart swell with pride. It's not complete. Not yet. Great-grandpa wanted these planes preserved for future generations. He wanted people to remember the courage of the men who flew them. We have to keep that promise. Marcus looked at his son, seeing not the angry teenager who had blamed him for everything, but a young man who understood what it meant to carry on a legacy. You're right, Marcus said. The mission isn't over. It's just beginning. And standing there in the Arizona desert, surrounded by the aircraft his grandfather had spent a lifetime protecting, Marcus Cole made a new promise. Not just to preserve the past, but to honor it by building something that would last forever. 6 months changed everything. Marcus stood in the newly renovated hangar watching construction crews put the finishing touches on what would become the Cole Aviation Heritage Museum. The rusted cars and scattered junk had been cleared away, replaced by modern exhibit spaces, climate-controlled display areas, and an education center that would teach future generations about the courage of those who had flown and fought. The 3 aircraft occupied positions of honor in the main gallery. Betty's dream gleamed under specially designed lighting that highlighted every detail of her wartime service. The twin Mustang sat beside her, its twin fuselages restored to museum quality after months of careful work. And the experimental Tiger Cat, the rarest of them all, held the center position where visitors would encounter it first. Tyler emerged from the education wing carrying a tablet loaded with the day's schedule. At 17, he had grown into his role as the museum's youngest docent, leading tours and explaining the history of each aircraft with a passion that reminded Marcus of his grandfather. The Morrison family is here, Tyler reported. Charlie Morrison's great-granddaughter brought photos we've never seen before. She wants to donate them to the collection. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Charlie Morrison, the pilot who had died over Berlin in 1945, whose aircraft had been preserved by William Cole for 70 years. His family had finally received closure, finally understood what had happened to their grandfather's plane. I'll meet them in the Memorial Gallery. The Memorial Gallery was Marcus's favorite part of the museum. Along one wall, photographs of every pilot connected to the 3 aircraft hung in simple wooden frames. Charlie Morrison, the WASP pilots Dorothy had served with, the test pilots who had flown the experimental Tiger Cat. Names that had been forgotten, now remembered. Sarah Chen had designed the exhibit using her research to track down family members, collect photographs, and document the stories of men and women whose sacrifices had nearly been erased from history. Amanda Morrison was waiting for him, a woman in her 50s with her grandfather's eyes. She held a small box filled with photographs, letters, and personal items that had been passed down through 3 generations. Mr. Cole, I can't thank you enough for what you've done. Please call me Marcus. Shh. Marcus? She opened the box and pulled out a photograph. A young man in military uniform standing beside a P-51 Mustang. This Mustang with Betty's dream painted on the nose. He was grinning at the camera with the confidence of someone who believed he was invincible. That's him. That's my grandfather, 3 days before he was killed. Marcus took the photograph carefully. He looks happy? He was. According to his letters, he loved flying more than anything. He wrote to my grandmother that being in the air made him feel free, like nothing else mattered except the sky and the machine. Marcus understood that feeling. He had experienced it himself during his military career, the transcendence of being completely focused on a single purpose. Would you like to see his plane? Amanda nodded, tears already forming in her eye. Marcus led her to Betty's dream, now polished to perfection and displayed with full historical documentation. The aircraft looked exactly as she had when Charlie Morrison had climbed into her cockpit for the last time. Amanda approached slowly, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the fuselage. He flew this plane. He sat in that cockpit. He trusted his life to this machine. She brought herself home after he was killed. Your grandfather's squadron leader wrote that Betty's dream flew back to base without a pilot, as if she was determined to survive even if her pilot couldn't. And your grandfather saved her. For 70 years, he believed that some things were worth preserving even when no one else understood. Amanda turned to Marcus with fierce gratitude in her eyes. My family spent decades not knowing what happened. The military told us his plane was destroyed. We had nothing to visit, nothing to touch, nothing to remind us that he was real. Now we have this. She embraced Marcus suddenly, a gesture that expressed more than words ever could. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finishing what your grandfather started. At noon, Dorothy Hayes arrived for her daily visit. The 84-year-old pilot had become the museum's most popular attraction. 3 times a week, she sat in the education center and told stories about the WASP, about flying fighters during the war, about the women who had served and died without recognition. Today, she was scheduled to record a video interview for the museum's archive, preserving her memories for future generations who would never have the chance to meet a real wartime pilot. Marcus found her in front of Betty's dream, talking to a group of elementary school children who listened with wide eyes. When I was your age, Dorothy was saying girls weren't supposed to fly airplanes. People said we weren't strong enough, smart enough, brave enough. But we proved them wrong. We flew every aircraft the Army had, from training planes to heavy bombers. We risked our lives every day to support the war effort. A little girl raised her hand. Were you scared? Dorothy smiled. Every single time I climbed into a cockpit. But courage isn't about not being scared. Courage is about doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. Marcus watched the children absorb her words, seeing the impact of living history on young minds. This was what his grandfather had wanted. Not just preserved aircraft, but preserved stories, preserved wisdom, preserved courage. After the children left, Dorothy approached Marcus with her characteristic directness. We need to talk about the anniversary event. The museum's grand opening was scheduled for the following month, timed to coincide with the anniversary of the historic formation flight. Invitations had gone out to veterans, historians, aviation enthusiasts, and media from around the world. What's the problem? The guest list. Someone added Senator Mercer's name. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Mercer had resigned in disgrace 6 months earlier, his political career destroyed by the revelations about his father's involvement in Project Nightfall. The former senator had retreated to his family estate, refusing all media requests and avoiding public appearances. Who added him? His daughter. She sent a letter asking if her father could attend privately to make amends. Amends? Marcus couldn't keep the anger from his voice. He tried to destroy everything we built. He threatened my family. He had Crane's men sabotage the aircraft and attack us. I know, and I'm not saying you should forgive him. Dorothy's eyes were serious. But I've lived long enough to know that carrying hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you can live with. Marcus considered her words. His grandfather had spent 60 years protecting these aircraft from men like Mercer. He had sacrificed his family, his reputation, his entire life to guard a truth that powerful people wanted buried. But William Cole's letter hadn't been about revenge. It had been about preservation, about memory, about ensuring that future generations would understand the courage of those who had come before. Tell her he can come, Marcus said finally. But he stays in the back. No photographs, no interviews, no recognition. Dorothy nodded. I'll make the arrangements. And Dorothy, if he tries anything, if he says one word that dishonors the people we're honoring, I'll handle it personally. Dorothy's smile was fierce. I didn't survive 80 years of men trying to diminish my achievements to let a disgraced politician ruin our moment. At 2 o'clock, Marcus received a call from Special Agent Williams. We have a development. Victor Crane is trying to negotiate a plea deal. Marcus had followed Crane's case closely. The man who had orchestrated the threats against his family was facing decades in federal prison on charges including conspiracy, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. What kind of deal has? He's offering testimony against other parties involved in the cover-up. Apparently Mercer wasn't the only politician protecting Project Nightfall. Crane has records of payments to judges, military officers, and at least 3 other members of Congress. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. How deep does this go? Deeper than we thought. The fraud from 1946 didn't end when Robert Mercer destroyed the evidence. It evolved, became a template for other cover-ups, other conspiracies. Crane was part of a network that has been protecting powerful interests for decades. And now he wants to expose them. He wants to save himself, but the information he's offering could bring down some very big names. Williams paused. There's something else. He's asking to speak with you. Why me? He didn't say, but I think he wants to understand why you fought so hard, why you didn't just take the money and walk away. Marcus considered the request. Part of him wanted to refuse to let Crane rot in prison without ever understanding what he had lost. But another part, the part that had learned the value of closure from his grandfather's story, wanted answers. Set up the meeting. 2 days later, Marcus sat across from Victor Crane in a federal detention facility. The man who had once threatened his family looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit. The smooth confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow expression of someone who had lost everything. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. I didn't come for you, I came for answers. Crane nodded slowly. Fair enough, ask your questions. Why did you do it? The threats. The sabotage, the attempted destruction of irreplaceable historical artifacts. Why was it worth destroying so much? Crane was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Because I believed in the mission. I believed that some secrets were too dangerous to reveal that protecting powerful interests served a greater good. He laughed bitterly. I was wrong. I spent 30 years protecting men who deserved prison, destroying evidence that deserved preservation, threatening people who were trying to do the right thing. And now I understand what your grandfather understood 70 years ago, that the truth matters more than power, that courage matters more than comfort, that some things are worth protecting even when it costs everything. Marcus studied the man who had been his enemy. He saw not a monster but a human being who had made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. My grandfather spent 60 years waiting for someone to understand what he had done. He died alone, estranged from his family, believing that his life's work might never be appreciated. I know, but he was wrong. His work was appreciated. His sacrifice meant something, and the truth he protected finally came out. Marcus leaned forward. That's what you never understood, Crane. You can delay the truth. You can bury it. You can threaten everyone who gets close to it, but you can't destroy it. The truth always finds a way to surface. Crane's eyes glistened with something that might have been regret. If I could go back? You can't. None of us can. All we can do is choose what we do next. Marcus stood to leave. At the door, he turned back one last time. The evidence you're offering, the testimony about the other conspirators, make sure it's complete, make sure it's truthful, make sure it honors the memory of everyone who suffered because of what you did. Why? Because that's how you make amends, not with words, with actions that matter. Marcus left the detention facility feeling lighter than he had in months. The weight of hatred he had been carrying was gone, replaced by something closer to peace. Crane would spend the rest of his life in prison. The conspirators he exposed would face justice. And the truth about Project Nightfall would be taught in schools, studied by historians, and remembered by generations who had never heard of William Cole or Esteban Salazar. That was victory enough. The month before the grand opening was chaos. Donations poured in from aviation enthusiasts around the world. Veterans organizations offered to sponsor exhibits. Schools requested educational materials. Documentary filmmakers sought permission to tell the story. Marcus delegated most of the operational decisions to Sarah Chen, who had accepted a permanent position as the museum's chief curator. Her academic expertise combined with her passion for the story made her the perfect choice to oversee the institution's growth. But some decisions only Marcus could make. Tyler approached him one evening as Marcus was reviewing plans for the memorial garden that would be planted behind the main hangar. Dad, I need to tell you something. Marcus looked up from the blueprints. His son's expression was serious, nervous even. What is it? I've been thinking about college, about what I want to do with my life. I thought you wanted to study aerospace engineering. I do. Tyler hesitated. But I also want to stay here, help run the museum, continue what Great-Grandpa started. Marcus felt pride and concern in equal measure. Tyler, you have your whole life ahead of you. You don't have to sacrifice your dreams to carry on a family legacy. I'm not sacrificing anything. This is my dream. Tyler's voice was firm. When I was leading tours explaining the history of these aircraft to kids who had never seen anything like them, that's when I felt most alive. More alive than any classroom ever made me feel. Marcus remembered a similar feeling from his own youth. The moment he had decided to become a Navy SEAL, the certainty that he had found his purpose. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Marcus pulled his son into an embrace. Then we'll figure it out together. College and museum work. You don't have to choose one or the other. You're not disappointed. Disappointed, Marcus pulled back to look at his son. Tyler, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I wasn't there when you needed me. I missed things I can never get back. But seeing you find your purpose, seeing you embrace this legacy, that's the proudest I've ever been. Tyler's eyes were bright with emotion. Dad, there's something else I need to say. What? I'm sorry for everything I said when you first came back, for blaming you for Mom's death, for telling you that you weren't my father. You don't have to apologize for that. Yes, I do. I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you. But I understand now. I understand why you served, why you sacrificed, why you stayed away even when it hurt. Tyler's voice cracked. You were protecting people, just like Great-Grandpa protected those planes. Just like we're protecting their memory now. Marcus couldn't speak. The words he had waited years to hear filled his chest with warmth that bordered on pain. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than anything. They stood together in the fading light, father and son bound by something stronger than blood or duty. Bound by purpose, by legacy, by the unbreakable connection between generations who chose to fight for something larger than themselves. The grand opening exceeded every expectation. 3,000 people gathered on the museum grounds, filling the viewing areas and spilling out onto the surrounding property. Veterans in dress uniforms mixed with families in casual clothes. Aviation enthusiasts compared notes with academic historians. Children ran between exhibits while their parents took photographs. Dorothy Hayes delivered the keynote address, her voice strong and clear despite her 84 years. 70 years ago, two men made a choice. They could have followed orders and let history be erased. Instead, they chose to protect the truth even when it cost them everything. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. William Cole and Esteban Salazar never received medals or recognition. They were called criminals, traitors, madmen. But they knew something that their persecutors never understood. They knew that courage doesn't need applause. Sacrifice doesn't require witnesses. The right thing is the right thing, whether anyone is watching or not. She turned to look at the 3 aircraft displayed behind her. These planes represent more than metal and engineering. They represent the souls of young men who gave everything for their country. Charlie Morrison, who died over Berlin at 22. The test pilots who pushed experimental aircraft to their limits. The mechanics and support crews who kept these birds flying against impossible odds. Her voice grew stronger. And they represent the courage of those who refused to let their memory die. William Cole, Esteban Salazar, and Marcus Cole, who finished what his grandfather started. The crowd applauded as Dorothy gestured for Marcus to join her at the podium. Marcus approached with mixed emotions. Public speaking had never been his strength, and standing before thousands of people felt more intimidating than any combat mission he had ever faced. But as he looked out at the crowd, at the veterans who had served and the families who had gathered at Tyler standing proudly in the front row, the fear faded. He spoke without notes from the heart. 6 months ago, I inherited a junkyard. Everyone told me it was worthless, just acres of rusted cars and broken dreams. He smiled slightly. They were wrong. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. What I actually inherited was a responsibility, a mission that had been waiting 70 years to be completed. My grandfather gave his life to protect these aircraft and the truth they represented. He believed that someday someone would understand. Someone would finish what he started. Marcus looked at the 3 planes at Betty's dream gleaming under the Arizona sun. I almost failed him. When I first found these aircraft, I thought about selling them, taking the money and walking away. It would have been easy. It would have been safe. He shook his head. But my grandfather didn't choose easy or safe. He chose right, and when it was my turn, I tried to do the same. He paused, gathering his thoughts. This museum isn't just about World War II aircraft. It's about what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice, when they stand up against powerful interests and say no more, when they preserve truth for future generations even when it costs them everything. Marcus turned to look at Tyler, at Dorothy, at the veterans and historians who had risked so much to help him. I didn't do this alone. I had help from people who believed in the mission as much as I did. Dorothy Hayes, who flew these planes during the war and flew them again 70 years later. Tom Bradley and his mechanics who worked through the night to restore aircraft everyone said couldn't be saved. Sarah Chen, who documented the truth and made sure it could never be buried again. Special Agent Williams, who chose justice over politics. He faced the crowd one final time. And my son Tyler, who taught me that family legacy isn't about the past. It's about the future. It's about the choices we make today and the world we leave for those who come after us. Marcus stepped back from the podium as the crowd erupted in applause. Tyler ran forward and embraced his father, and Marcus held on tight, feeling the connection between generations flowing through them like electricity. At 3:15 that afternoon, the highlight of the ceremony took place. 3 aircraft fully restored and maintained in flying condition sat on the runway that had been professionally constructed on the museum grounds. Betty's Dream, Desert Fox, and Nightfall 1, the experimental Tiger Cat that had nearly crashed on its historic flight 6 months earlier. Dorothy climbed into Betty's Dream's cockpit with the agility that had become her trademark. Tom Bradley took the twin Mustang, and Jack Morrison, who had returned from retirement for this moment, settled into the Tiger Cat. Marcus stood at the edge of the runway with Tyler beside him, watching as 3 pieces of living history prepared to fly again. "Formation Cole, you are cleared for departure." Dorothy's voice crackled over the speakers positioned around the viewing area. "Copy that ground. This one's for William, and for Esteban, and for everyone who believed that some things are worth fighting for." The engines roared to life in sequence, filling the air, with sounds that connected the present to a past when such formations had been common. Betty's Dream rolled forward, first accelerating smoothly down the runway before lifting into the Arizona sky. The twin Mustang followed its twin engines, harmonizing in a melody of mechanical perfection. And finally, the Tiger Cat joined them, its experimental configuration creating a silhouette that existed nowhere else in the world. 3 aircraft climbed in formation, circling the museum as thousands of people watched with tears in their eyes. Marcus watched his grandfather's dream finally realized. Not just preserved aircraft, but flying aircraft. Not just static exhibits, but living machines. Living machines that demonstrated the courage and engineering of a generation that had saved the world. Tyler gripped his father's arm. "Dad, look." He pointed to the formation as it passed overhead, and Marcus saw what his son had noticed. The 3 aircraft had aligned themselves to create a shadow that moved across the ground like a giant bird, a phoenix, rising from the ashes of forgotten history. The formation completed 3 circuits of the museum before lining up for landing. One by one, the aircraft touched down, their pilots greeted by cheers that echoed across the desert. Dorothy emerged from Betty's Dream and walked directly to Marcus. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said simply. "He would be proud of all of us." Dorothy smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young woman who had ferried fighters across the country 80 years ago. "Then our job is done. The birds are home. The truth is told, and the future is secure." That evening, after the crowds had departed and the museum had grown quiet, Marcus walked alone through the memorial gallery. He stopped before his grandfather's photograph, displayed prominently among the others who had sacrificed for this legacy. William Cole, young and determined, standing beside an aircraft with a toolbox in his hand and purpose in his eyes. "I hope I did right by you," Marcus said quietly. "I hope this is what you wanted." The photograph didn't answer, but Marcus felt a presence in the gallery, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. He pulled a letter from his pocket. The original letter his grandfather had written, preserved behind glass in the exhibit, but reproduced for Marcus to keep. Some things are worth more than money. They're worth preserving for the generations who will never know the sound of freedom flying overhead. Marcus understood now. His grandfather hadn't been talking about aircraft. He had been talking about truth, about courage, about the willingness to sacrifice for something larger than oneself. William Cole had preserved more than machines. He had preserved the memory of what ordinary people could accomplish when they refused to surrender to injustice. And now that memory would live forever. Tyler found his father still standing in the gallery an hour later. "Dad, you okay?" Marcus turned to his son with a smile. "I'm better than okay. I'm at peace." "The museum board wants to talk about expansion plans. They're thinking about adding a restoration center where we can work on other historic aircraft." "That sounds like something your great-grandfather would have approved of." Tyler nodded. "I was thinking, maybe we could call it the Salazar Cole Restoration Center to honor both of them." Marcus felt his heart swell. "I think that's exactly right." They walked out of the gallery together, passing the 3 aircraft that had brought them here. Betty's Dream, Desert Fox. Nightfall 1. 3 survivors of a war that had ended 80 years ago, preserved by men who believed that courage should never be forgotten. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The museum grounds were empty now, but tomorrow they would fill again with visitors eager to learn about the past and carry its lessons into the future. Marcus stopped at the entrance and looked back at the building one last time. "What are you thinking about?" Tyler asked. about how much has changed. 6 months ago, I was a broken man with nothing left to fight for. Now you have a mission. Now I have a purpose, a legacy, a son who understands what sacrifice really means." Tyler put his arm around his father's shoulders. "We have each other. That's what matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what matters." They walked toward the parking lot where Marcus's truck waited. The same truck Colonel Patterson had used to rescue them from Crane's men. The same truck that had carried them through the most dangerous and transformative weeks of their lives. As Marcus started the engine, his phone buzzed with a message from Dorothy. Charlie Morrison's family just endowed a scholarship fund in his name. First recipient is a young woman from Tucson who wants to become a pilot. The legacy continues. Marcus showed the message to Tyler, who grinned. Great-grandpa would have loved that. He would have loved all of it. They drove in comfortable silence as the sky darkened overhead. Stars appeared one by one, the same stars that had guided pilots home during the war, the same stars that had watched over William Cole's Junkyard for 70 years. Marcus thought about everything that had happened, the discovery, the threats, the sabotage and the chase and the desperate flight that had changed everything. He thought about the enemies who had tried to destroy them and the friends who had risked everything to help, but mostly he thought about family, about his grandfather who had sacrificed everything to protect a truth that powerful men wanted buried, about Esteban Salazar who had spent 2 years in prison rather than betray his principles, about Dorothy Hayes and Tom Bradley and Sarah Chen and all the others who had joined the fight because they believed in something larger than themselves, and about Tyler, his son, his partner, the next guardian of the Cole family legacy. "Dad." "Yeah. I'm glad you came back." Marcus reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "So am I, son. So am I." The truck turned onto the highway, heading toward the apartment they now shared in Tucson. Behind them, the museum stood silent in the darkness, its aircraft waiting for tomorrow's visitors, its exhibits preserving stories that had nearly been lost forever. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an endless runway full of possibilities that neither of them could have imagined 6 months earlier. Marcus Cole had spent 20 years as a Navy SEAL fighting enemies he could see, but his greatest battle had been against something invisible, the corruption that tried to erase history, the powerful interests that wanted truth buried, the despair that had nearly consumed him after losing his wife and his career. He had won that battle, not with weapons or tactics, but with courage, persistence, and the unshakable belief that some things were worth fighting for. His grandfather had understood that truth. Esteban Salazar had understood it. Dorothy Hayes had lived it every day of her remarkable life, and now Marcus understood it too. The legacy of the Cole family wasn't measured in aircraft or museums or money. It was measured in the choices each generation made when faced with impossible odds. William Cole had chosen to preserve, as Marcus Cole had chosen to fight, and Tyler Cole would choose to continue. That was the real inheritance. Not junk or treasure, but purpose. Not wealth, but wisdom. Not fame, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you had done the right thing when it mattered most. Marcus looked at his son one more time, seeing the young man he would become, the guardian he was already becoming. "Tyler?" "Yeah, Dad." "Promise me something." "Anything." "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, you'll never forget what we learned. That truth matters, that courage matters, that family is worth fighting for." Tyler met his father's eyes with unwavering determination. "I promise, Dad. I'll never forget." Marcus nodded, satisfied. The truck continued into the night, carrying 2 members of a family whose legacy stretched back 70 years and would extend forward for generations to come. Behind them, 3 aircraft waited in the darkness, their stories finally told, their pilots finally honored their purpose, finally fulfilled. And somewhere in the vast Arizona sky, among stars that had watched over a nation since its founding, the spirits of those who had flown and fought and died seemed to whisper their approval. The mission was complete. The birds had come home. And the Cole family legacy would never be forgotten, because some things are worth more than money, worth more than comfort, worth more than life itself. Some things are worth preserving forever. And Marcus Cole had proven beyond any doubt that he was worthy of the responsibility his grandfather had entrusted to him. The truth had been told. Justice had been served, and the sound of freedom would continue flying overhead for generations yet to come.